The wonderful adventures of the Warhammer elf. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201, Mighty. This is a lie. The previous battle reports have shown that there are traces of magic on the battlefield, and my family warlocks also claim to have seen you cast magic. This is absolutely a lie. Hearing that Rohan dared to lie in front of the Witch King, Higgs excitedly jumped off the back of the cold lizard, pointed at Rohan, and shouted to the people around him. This guy not only lied that he was the Northern Army commander appointed by the Witch King on the day my troops entered the city and seized the command of my army, but he was also a despicable villain who tried to assassinate me. Seizing military power is easy to say, but is it true that he assassinated the Dreadlord? Assassinating the Dreadlord? It doesn't sound like something a rational new lord would do. The highest punishment is to execute the entire clan. Hearing this, the Dreadlords who held military power in the stands began to discuss and began to look at Rohan with suspicion and hostility. They didn't think it was strange to lie about identity and seize military power. After all, in the cruel land of Nagaroth such things often happened in remote areas. Even if the matter was exposed, they only needed to pay a fine to Castle Black that matched their title, and the matter could be treated as if it had never happened. After all, this kind of thing was not prohibited by law, so even the Witch King mostly turned a blind eye. However, being suspected of assassinating another Dreadlord was beyond the acceptance of most nobles. After all, this had seriously violated the law protecting the nobles. Looking at the nobles around him who were engaged in a heated argument, the Witch King did not show any anger. Instead, he slowly leaned back in his seat and asked Marina beside Rohan, "You are Marina who received the invitation letter together? Tell me what you know." "Yes, respected Witch King, I'm the Dreadlord of Alcadora who was appointed by you personally, so I know very well about the conflict between the two lords." Marina saluted gracefully to the Witch King, then pointed at Higgs, whose face was slightly stiff in the distance, and explained to the nobles around her, "This lord named Higgs is a coward. He abandoned his soldiers and betrayed his post when the situation was still unclear, causing Alcadora to almost fall. Not only that, he is also a rather despicable villain. When the Chaos Army was approaching, he threatened that his army would withdraw from the fortress and wanted to force me to marry him in order to usurp the rule of Alcadora." Wow. As soon as these words came out, the whole audience was in an uproar. Although most nobles would be interested in such an act of usurping a city, they were still very surprised when it was exposed. Those citizens who originally came to watch the show were even more excited. They had paid to come in to watch the trial, but they didn't expect to see a fuss between nobles. It was really worth the money. In the stands, Higgs's father, the patriarch, had already turned around and left the scene. He had completely lost hope for his son's stupid behavior. It was troublesome enough to provoke a Dreadlord, but he didn't expect his son to be so promising and provoked to at once. Seeing his father abandon him, Higgs could no longer hide the expression on his face. He angrily pointed his warhammer at Rohan who was still saluting and cursed. "No matter how you explain, you can't change the fact that you secretly learned magic. My family warlocks have told me that you defeated the Lord of Change with magic. This act of violating the order of the Lord Witch King is a blasphemy." The male nobles in the stands nodded when they heard this. After all, the prohibition of male elves from learning magic is written in the law, and no one can disobey it. After all, this matter involves the rights and interests of all male elves, and there is no room for compromise and understanding. If Rohan really learned magic secretly, he must be executed immediately, otherwise it would be unfair to all male elves who obeyed the law and failed to learn magic. If all male nobles learn magic in private, wouldn't it make the already chaotic order of Nagaroth even worse? Facing Higgs's almost hysterical accusation, Rohan looked at the expensive armor on the other party with interest and asked, "It was Mekasha who wrote to you. Didn't she tell you which type of magic I cast?" Hearing this, Higgs's expression was obviously stagnant, but a hint of teasing appeared at the corner of his mouth under the mask of the Witch King. If Rohan was using magic from another world at that time, then in a sense, He did not violate his law. Magic that can directly destroy a changeling lord. It seems that Rohan's wings are a little hard. He didn't even pay tribute when he had good things. Rohan didn't know that the Witch King had already been thinking about his unfounded magic from another world, but instead expected Higgs to bring him more ugliness. His intelligence and knowledge completely crushed Higgs, so he could treat the other party as a jumping clown without any scruples and let the other party speak rudely. He is no longer the weak new nobleman a few years ago, and he doesn't have to care about the boring political struggles of his colleagues. Even the citizens could see that compared to the elegant Rohan, the angry and frightened Higgs was so ugly. This was the confidence brought by confidence and strength. Anyway, the fact that you cast magic is a fact, and there is no way to quibble about it. Higgs didn't care what Rohan was talking about. He only knew that he only needed to bite Rohan to death, that he could use magic, which was enough to convict him. Morathi, who was next to the Witch King, had also stood up at this time, ignoring the greedy eyes of the nobles and citizens looking at her, and shouted righteously, "For our eternal Phoenix King, we should immediately execute this traitor who violated the prophecy and let order return to Nagaland. That's right, and we should deprive him of his property. These silver dragons should be distributed to those who have made contributions on the battlefield." Lacus, who was secretly approaching Carrot, also shouted excitedly, as if he and Rohan had an irreconcilable feud. He was sure that these silver dragons were new species he had never seen before, and there were faint magic runes on their scales, which were obviously quite rare species. Rohan ignored the two legendary lords who were trying to kill him, and instead looked at the Lord Witch King on the stage, and admitted carelessly, "There is no need to doubt my loyalty to the Lord Witch King, because I can indeed cast magic." Chapter 202, On a Duel. As soon as the words fell, Morathi's face immediately showed a happy smile, and the staff in her hand quickly slapped the ground, not even giving Rohan and his son beside him time to react. Ping, the wind of death in the air began to grow, and a purple chain filled with death light instantly rose from the ground, and flew towards Rohan's waist and limbs. Seeing this scene, Higgs, who was hiding on the side, finally relaxed his face, and the nobles who had placed bets also smiled. The faces of the black guards all showed worry, and Irel's hand even touched the black iron halberd placed diagonally on the seat, hesitating whether to save people. "Put your hands down, the field is almost full of my assassins, you have no chance." A cold voice came from behind Irel. Irel was so scared that he quickly took out the short knife at his waist and looked back, but was grabbed by the wrist. The assassin Master Kull was sitting behind him, staring at him with a terrifying look, as if he was looking at a dead person. Seeing that all the black guards were getting agitated, Kull couldn't help but secretly sigh at Rohan's strong influence on the black guards, and then calmly said, "Since you are loyal to the Witch King, I don't mind telling you some inside information. Rohan can't die." "What? That kid is much smarter than you. He left a letter to the Witch King a long time ago, saying that he has been chosen by the Lady of the Mist, and maybe the future chosen one." After releasing Irel's wrist, Kull turned his attention back to Rohan, who had slapped Morath, Karoi's shackles, in the field. The young man who once dared not even kill people has now become an excellent warrior that even he can't underestimate. After 3 days of absence, you should look at him with new eyes. Put away your despicable magic. My magic is a gift from the Lady of the Mist, and any chaos will be brought to justice. With a proud shout, Rohan's eyes burst into terrifying lightning, and he looked at Morathi with a grin like a beast about to attack. He was not the injured person who let her play with him because of his serious injury. Even if Morathi's magic attainments were among the best in the world, he was not afraid of her. What's more, he didn't use magic, did he? The gamblers in the stands, who were cursing and cheering, were so scared that they shut their mouths and looked at Rohan in horror. Without systematic teaching, they could not tell the difference between God's gift and magic, and thought that Rohan was going to fight to the death with the mother of the Witch King. On the contrary, the nobles noticed the clues. Although they had not learned to cast magic, they had learned relevant theoretical knowledge, so they could naturally see that this was not a manifestation of magic. Needless to say, anyone can see that this blow light belongs to the high magic of Asur, not the death magic popular in Durachi. Most importantly, Asur's high magic. Durachi can't master it at all. According to the Order of the Winds of Magic, the Wizards of Ulthor need a combination of at least 2 kinds of magic to release high magic. But because this order has always been controlled by the Wizards of the White Tower, even more if he can only create death magic with failed combinations. Coupled with the unique glowing eyes of the living saint, it is clear that Rohan should be a lucky person chosen by a god. Everyone's eyes are on the Lord Witch King, waiting for him to pronounce the sentence on this farce caused by Higgs. This matter can be big or small. At the smallest, it is just a lucky person who is blessed by God and can release high magic. At the largest, it is a violation of the law and should be sentenced to death. After all, the grace of being granted high magic shows that Rohan believes in the upper gods of Ulthuan instead of the common underground gods in the Nagaroth region. Although the law does not explicitly prohibit it, the upper gods are not very popular among the Nagaroth people, so they may also be sentenced. The Lord Witch King on the main seat remained silent, which made Rohan, who was confident that he would be safe, feel a little angry. After all, he is a loyal minister. Every year, he contributes at least hundreds of thousands of gold coins to the treasury through the otherworld trade. It shouldn't be a case of spitting out the dead dog and cooking it, right? Seeing that her son did not stand up for her, Morathi snorted coldly and then twisted her slender waist with her wand and left the arena. In her opinion, this trial has become meaningless and she might as well take this opportunity to find a few believers of the joy cult to have fun. Finally, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the Lord Witch King slowly stood up from his seat and said to Higgs with a tense face, "He has proved his loyalty, so now it's your turn to be accused. Do you have anything to defend yourself about your unauthorized escape from the battlefield?" "No. This is impossible." Higgs couldn't help but panic when he heard that the Lord Witch King actually pointed the finger at him. He didn't expect the situation to become what it is now. The envelope sent by Mekisha a few days ago showed that Rohan's magic was secretly practiced, and it was a common death magic. How come in the blink of an eye, this guy became the chosen one of the upper gods? Suddenly, Higgs noticed that Rohan was wearing a familiar amber bracelet on his hand, which was the enchanted bracelet he had given to Mekisha before. That cousin defected to Rohan. As if noticing that Higgs was staring at him, Rohan turned his head to look at Higgs with a dazed expression, shook the bracelet on his hand without concealing it, and a trace of mockery appeared on his face. But Higgs suddenly felt his brain buzzing. He felt like a clown being played around by Rohan. Thinking of this, Higgs simply stopped hiding his suppressed brutality and bloodthirstiness. He pointed the sawtooth warhammer in his hand at Rohan and roared, "You win the court battle, Rohan, but you, a scumbag who came out of nowhere, don't think of tarnishing my glory with this method. I want to challenge you to a glorious duel." "That's right, duel. Go. Higgs, use your blood to wash away your glory and shame." The audience cheered excitedly. Although most citizens didn't know the difference between God's gift and magic, they also preferred bloody duels. After all, they paid for the tickets to come in. If they could see a bloody duel between nobles, it would be a good thing for them. Looking at Higgs bathed in cheers, Marina couldn't help but touch her mask. This guy was really as narcissistic and confident as ever. Did he forget that mounts are allowed in Glory Duel? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203, Kane's Incarnation, Fake. Amid the cheers of the crowd, Higgs raised his shield and saw-toothed warhammer, pointed at the altar of Kane in the distance and shouted, "I challenge you and your god, Rohan. I will offer my blood and soul to prove your cowardice and meanness to Bloodhand Kane." As soon as the voice fell, Higgs' eyes showed an imperceptible red light, and then even ignored Rohan's weapon before he drew it and actually took the lead to launch a charge. Looking at Higgs, who was walking back to him, Rohan gestured to the radish who was ready to spit fire, and then drew his sword to meet him. He could feel that, because of Higgs's blasphemous remarks, the gentle eyes of the Mist Lady were looking at him, expecting him to kill this pagan with his own hands. Under the joyful gaze of the audience, the rune sword in Rohan's hand and the battle axe in Higgs' hand collided violently. Bang! A weak wave of air flew around. feeling the numbness in his palm, Rohan looked at Higgs in surprise, but only saw a pair of scholar eyes. Higgs's condition was very wrong at this time. Lightning similar to Rohan's was slowly bursting out from the depths of his pupils. The difference was that the color of this magic lightning was as dazzling as the lightning in the Chaos Wasteland, and it even began to tear Higgs' eyelids. Higgs didn't seem to notice the changes in his body. He forced Rohan back with a fierce shield strike, and then swung the sawtooth warhammer wildly, with a piercing roar from his mouth. "It's all you. You took away my legion, and blasphemed my glory. Are you on drugs?" Equipped with only a one-handed rune sword, Rohan could only cover Marina behind him to leave the venue, while constantly pulling away and leading the opponent to the center of the arena. The situation seemed extremely unfavorable to Rohan. Higgs was equipped with a large number of sophisticated magic props, and the slashes from Rohan could not cause any damage to the enchanted shield at all. Even if the sword blade with the armor-breaking attribute could penetrate the gap and cut into Higgs' armor, it would only leave an imperceptible scratch on it. After dodging another heavy hammer, Rohan looked at the cracked ground and began to be surprised. It seems that even with the bonus of the system, the armor-breaking effect of this sword blade is still not as good as that of the hammer. When did this kid become so good at fighting? Just as Rohan was about to continue his attack, the gentle voice of Lady Mist was transmitted to his ears through divine power. "You'd better be careful. I can feel that Uncle Kane is constantly strengthening this young man. It is estimated that it won't be long before his strength will be equal to yours." "What the hell? I was also a believer of Kane. Why did you help him and not me?" Looking at the blood-red warhammer in Higgs's hand, Rohan also hurriedly infused magic power into the sword body, making his weapon light up blue. "Compared with special effects, I'm no worse than you." In the Temple of Iris, Rajlia looked at the crimson figure standing in the palace with some annoyance, and explained helplessly, "There's nothing we can do. Uncle Kane noticed your previous battle with the Lord of Change, and felt that your behavior was somewhat unfair, so he decided to give you a test himself. Don't worry, with me here, Uncle Kane won't go too far, and even if he strengthens your opponent, it won't exceed the range of the Chosen One. As long as you can win this battle, I will immediately promote you to be my Chosen One, and I will never break my promise." After figuring out the ins and outs of the matter, Rohan had to take out a bag of ebony javelins from the space and hang them on his back, and at the same time, took out a black iron halberd. Looking at the fake Kane avatar in front of him who had begun to mutate, Rohan began to run around the field while complaining, "What a trouble. Why don't you use the energy to destroy chaos? Why do you have to find me?" However, he no longer had the time to listen to the response of the Lady of the Mist, because while he was sorting out his equipment, Higgs had already thrown down his shield and rushed towards him. Raw. I don't know if it was Kane's power that began to take effect. The hammer in Higgs's hand gradually began to change, and finally turned into a two-handed sword emitting scarlet flames. Even the helmet on his head, which already had sharp serrations, suddenly extended two pairs of huge sharp horns, standing on the helmet like rabbit ears. This is simply a smaller version of Kane. Looking at the two chosen ones who were confronting each other on the field, the surrounding audience fell silent, and then burst into thunderous cheers. They didn't know the difference between chosen and living saints. They only knew that the two nobles on the field were powerful warriors blessed by the gods. The duel between Kane's chosen and Lady of the Mist's chosen was really worth the money. As for the trial, who cares about that damn trial when you can see the duel between the chosen? On the stage, the Witch King was watching the two people fighting with interest. The wind of magic was dancing between the two people, creating waves of fierce waves in the air. Morathi had returned to her seat without knowing when. From the depression and blush on her face, it was not difficult to see that she was attracted back before she could even start the foreplay. Seeing the battle on the field intensifying and even beginning to affect the audience in the front row, Morathi could not help but rub her thigh, changed her mind, and advised the Witch King, there is no need to let them fight to the death. These two are rare, chosen ones. They should be allowed to die on the battlefield on the way to Ulthuan, not in boring political struggles. This is the will of Red Hand Kane. Since he wants to see a bloody battle, let's make the battle more intense. Haha, you should show some courage like your father. The gods are just a carrier to enhance your strength. You should climb to a higher destination. While the two were talking, the battle below had also reached a white-hot stage. Don't run, you coward. Higgs, or the incarnation of Cain, was now madly chasing Rohan, who was running around the field, constantly drawing flaming sword energy with the giant sword in his hand, and flying towards Rohan. Rohan was not to be outdone, constantly using his halberd to disperse these sword energy, and then throwing out several javelins containing magic power to shoot at the incarnation of Cain. However, the opponent's strength this time was very similar to Rohan's. The flaming giant sword could easily block these javelins and continue to chase Rohan. The audience in the stands were very dissatisfied with this chase. They stood up from their seats and pointed at Rohan and shouted, "Stop running around, stop and fight him. This battle is under the watchful eyes of Bloody Hand. You should show your strength. Kill him. Kill him." All kinds of roars came from the stands, making Rohan, who was busy escaping, miserable. He looked helplessly at the half-melted black iron halberd in his hand. He also wanted to stop and fight with Cain's incarnation in close combat, but his weapon did not allow it. Chapter 204, Cain's Sword, Fake. The flaming sword blessed by Bloodhand Cain can easily melt any ordinary weapon, not to mention that Rohan's black iron halberd is a mass-produced product. Even if Rohan attached magic power to the halberd blade, he could only barely resist a few attacks, and then he was chopped into pieces again. Don't run, you coward. If you have the guts, stop and duel with me. As Higgs' soul was completely devoured, Cain's incarnation became more and more crazy and brutal, ignoring the spectators around him and emitting blood-red sword energy one after another. Facing this false chosen one with the same strength as himself, Rohan could only use the rune sword to resist these annoying sword energies while using the force to escape to the distance. It's not that he didn't dare to face the enemy head on, but the emerald rune sword is a one-handed sword, which has no advantage when facing a more flexible two-handed sword. What's more, due to Cain's blessing, this incarnation has extremely skilled fighting skills, and for a while the two could only slowly engage in a war of attrition. After suddenly leaping up from the air, Rohan took out a few magic-infused flying knives and threw them at Cain's incarnation, then cursed angrily, "Come on. Anyway, I have green legs, full of physical strength. If you have the guts, you can continue to fight with me." However, Cain's incarnation did not care about the flying knives that pierced deeply into his body, but continued to charge at Rohan with endless anger. Looking at this little red man rushing towards him with a bloody sword raised high, Rohan could only use the rune sword to meet him, while secretly complaining in his heart. After this battle is over, he must find a way to make a Warhammer or longsword that can be wielded with both hands as the main weapon. The blue sword body kept colliding with the blood-red sword, and the fierce collision and breaking sound spread throughout the arena. Hundreds of years of combat experience made the swords of the two people go straight to each other's vital points, which made the audience who risked their lives to stay and watch the show excited. However, as time passed, Rohan, who held the sword with one hand, was once again forced to fall into a disadvantage and could only start to retreat helplessly. The sword moves of Cain's incarnation were all kinds of strange. Whenever Rohan tried to explore the rules and techniques in them, the opponent would always switch moves without defense. The fire sword was like a scarlet crescent moon, constantly flying in front of Rohan, sometimes making heavy slashes and bombardments, and sometimes being as graceful and light as a shrew dancer. Even though Rohan had 100 years of combat experience, he was helpless in the face of such flexible swordsmanship switching and weapon disadvantages, and he couldn't even steal the opponent's swordsmanship. Damn it, I've been bombing fish ponds all the time, but I'm a little uncomfortable with this high-end game. After barely using the rune sword to cut a hole in Cain's incarnation's armor, Rohan looked at the flames gushing out of the opponent's wound, gritted his teeth and retreated again. In the past, he would have already activated the power of God's favor and used the powerful power of Mist God's Chosen to crush the enemy in front of him to death. But the problem is that his God's favor can only last for 30 seconds and can only be activated when Cain and his incarnation have not yet reacted. Otherwise, when Cain, who does not know the truth, Blesses him, Rohan cannot guarantee whether his opponent will really evolve into a complete Kane's incarnation. By then, let alone Rohan, even the Witch King may not be able to help. Looking at Rohan, who was always running around in the field, Kane's incarnation seemed to be tired of this chase game, so he suddenly inserted the flaming sword into the soil and shouted, "Those who oppose me will all be reduced to ashes." With this roar from the soul, the sky of Nagaran gradually turned blood red, and even the Kane altar in the center of the city burst into dazzling flames. This abnormality is undoubtedly the dissatisfaction of Bloodhand Kane with Rohan's weak behavior. The witches of the Kane temple went crazy and began to sacrifice more slaves and even passers-by. Fresh blood and souls were continuously absorbed by the altar. They didn't know why the great Karamensha, Kane, was angry, but now was undoubtedly the best time to attract Kane's attention. Sure enough, under the sacrifice of countless blood and souls, Kane's incarnation's restless and angry heart gradually calmed down. Looking at Rohan, who was still trying to dodge not far away, Kane's incarnation's face covered with flames revealed a touch of humanized mockery. As the incarnation of the god of fire and war, he was eager to chop the fly running around in front of him into two halves. But he had already seen that Rohan, who had no suitable weapon, had no courage to fight him head on, so he simply snorted and threw the flaming sword in his hand towards Rohan. Whoosh! The sword, burning with the fire of revenge, accurately pierced in front of Rohan, instantly burning the land into a charred black and constantly expanding to the surroundings. Just as Rohan was hesitating as he looked at the flaming sword in front of him, a thunderous voice suddenly came from the sky, and with uncontrollable anger, he ordered him, "Take up this sword and prove your blood and glory to me, otherwise I will punish you with God." Then Kane's incarnation suddenly stabbed his sharp claws into his chest that was boiling with flames, and pulled out a beating heart. There is no doubt that it was the heart of Higgs's broken body who had lost his soul. Amid the excited roars of the surrounding audience, the heart in Kane's incarnation gradually emitted dazzling flames, and finally condensed into a brand new flaming sword. Can you make this thing anytime and anywhere? Looking at these two swords of exactly the same style, Rohan secretly complained in his heart, and then pulled out the flaming sword in front of him. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the flaming sword was put into the system space by Rohan, and then taken out in an instant, without attracting anyone's attention. Sword of Kane falls. Sword of Kane is an epic sword forged for Kane by Val, the god of craftsmen of the elves. It was lost in the mortal world for unknown reasons. Mortals who use the Sword of Kane will become Kane's chosen ones and gain powerful power from Kane, but they will also become bad-tempered and bloodthirsty villains, and eventually be promoted to Kane himself. Sword of Kane falls. A great sword transformed by Kane's own divine power, although it will not allow the user to gain as powerful power as the genuine one. It will also enhance the user's various attributes, and the negative effects will not be so serious. Warning: long-term use of this weapon may have a certain negative impact on the spirit. Please consider it carefully. Features: melee attack plus 10, armor piercing damage plus 150, special protection plus 10%. After a brief review of the data provided by the system, Rohan held the hilt with both hands, and immediately felt an indescribable force covering his whole body. What kind of power is this? Raging rage continued to attack Rohan's brain, and the silver armor of Isolama on his body emitted a red storm that swept around. Looking at the incarnation of Kane who had just suppressed him, Rohan pointed his sharp sword at him, and a sense of pride emerged in his heart. The first Phoenix King, Inarion, should have been so high-spirited, right? Come on, miscellaneous cultivator. But make no mistake, I'm not challenging you, but you are challenging the glory of the Lady of the Mist. Chapter 205, Glory Showdown. Finally 200. Yeah, so much alike. Morathi, who had been sitting on a chair swinging her legs in boredom, slowly stood up from her seat, looking at the heroic figure in the arena with a little fascination. Back then, Inarion was as high-spirited as Rohan, constantly wielding the Sword of Kane to kill the demons who tried to board Ulthuan, and saving her from a Slanesh warband. It's not that Rohan looks so similar to Inarion, but because in the nearly 10,000 years of history, she hasn't seen such a figure for a long time. If he is replaced with a real Sword of Kane, and with the help of her black magic, can Inarion be called back to the world? Rohan didn't know that he had been targeted. At this time, he was under the influence of Sword of Cain Falls, fighting fiercely with the incarnation of Cain in front of him. Ping ping ping. The continuous sound of iron hammering came from between the two. The two, who were already equally powerful, started to fight each other with the bonus of their common weapons. Countless sparks entered Rohan's face through the gaps in the armor, but these flames did not burn Rohan's body, but made him swing the sword more frantically. That's right, this is the fight I have always expected. Feeling his slightly trembling arms, Cain's incarnation's eyes gushed out more flames, and he was obviously very satisfied with this battle. He didn't know how powerful the flaming sword he sent gave Rohan, and thought that this was Rohan slowly growing in the battle. Cain actually had a lot of anger towards this pseudo-believer who always fooled him during the sacrifice. Compared with those fragile humans and the dirty and fragile souls of the Radman, he hoped that Rohan could offer him the blood of his own people. However, this fierce battle did make his anger towards Rohan subside a lot, so he didn't care about the past, but instead focused on watching this duel. He is not an evil god. As long as Rohan is willing to offer a wonderful battle, then he can also feel satisfied. As if influenced by Bloodhand Cain, the Scholar Cain incarnation also swung the sword more excitedly, and the violent slashes continued to splash towards Rohan. He hoped to see blood, even if it was on his own body. Trade wounds for wounds. I'm not that stupid. However, facing the fierce attack of Cain's incarnation, Rohan suppressed the influence of Cain's sword on himself, and turned to defend with relatively conservative sword moves. The bracelet given to him by Mekasa was constantly helping him to dispel the burning anger in his heart, making his brain feel a little clear. Although he didn't mind trading wounds for wounds, this battle was carried out under the watchful eyes of the Lady of the Mist. If he really got himself covered in wounds, even if he won the duel, it would be the lady's face that was lost. The two flaming swords collided fiercely, and with the effort of Cain's incarnation holding the hilt tightly and wrestling with him, Rohan suddenly turned sideways and picked up the opponent's sword. Seeing the opponent's exposed weakness, Rohan did not intend to directly stab the opponent's chest with his sword, but slashed at the opponent's calf. He knew that, if he really attacked the opponent's chest, then the Cain incarnation would definitely fight with him with the idea of dying together. It's a pity that this incarnation did not become Cain's chosen, so as a mortal, he still couldn't get rid of his body's instincts. Roar. The sharp sword blade easily cut Cain's ankle. Cain's incarnation, whose left leg tendon was cut, subconsciously launched a slash, but was easily blocked by Rohan due to imbalance. Looking at Cain's incarnation kneeling on one knee, the audience who were still cheering on the field immediately quieted down and looked at Rohan, who came behind the incarnation nervously. Is the incarnation of Bloodhand Cain going to be defeated by Mistwalker? Rohan did not relax his guard. He always kept a safe distance and kept provoking him. In the name of the Holy Rajya, I, Rohan, the most devout mortal walker of Lady Mist, hereby declare you defeated. Do you have any last words before you die? I haven't lost yet, you bastard. If you have the guts, keep fighting me. Facing Rohan's words as a winner, Cain's incarnation could not help but roar angrily, and terrifying flames continued to burst out from his sharp teeth. Turning his head to look at Rohan, who was wandering behind him, Cain's incarnation suddenly exerted force with his left foot, raised his greatsword like a tiger pouncing on its prey, and swept towards Rohan. The blood-red sword light turned into a waning moon, slashing towards Rohan's waist, as if to split Rohan in half. Unfortunately, since he could only rely on the jumping power of one leg, this seemingly swift slash was perfectly avoided by Rohan with a slight retreat, and then he raised his greatsword and stabbed Cain's incarnation's head. Puff! The flaming sword directly penetrated the sharp-horned head of Cain's incarnation, and countless blood mixed with flames gushed out from the wound, making it raw. The sharp claws kept grabbing the sword in Rohan's hand, trying to tear Rohan's arm with the last strength. However, Rohan drew out the sword, then kicked the opponent's chest directly, and used this sword of Cain to chop off the head of Cain's incarnation. Puff! The body, which was split into two, slowly fell to the ground, and the head, emitting magical flames, rolled on the ground for several circles, and finally the flames were slowly extinguished. The entire duel field fell into a dead silence. The audience looked at the gradually transforming body of Higgs on the ground with complicated expressions, and fell into silence. Should I cheer? But it was Kane's incarnation who died, and Bloodhand Kane was watching this duel. If I cheered, would it attract divine punishment? Just when the audience was hesitant, Rohan would not play any empty words with them. He was the winner, and now was his time to enjoy the glory. Picking up Higgs's head burned by the flames from the ground, Rohan raised the head to the sky with one hand, and stabbed the flaming sword into the soil with the other hand. The Kane altar in the distance roared, "I won. I defeated your incarnation. Will you abide by the rules of the glorious duel?" The honorable duel was originally a duel initiated by Kane's followers. The winner can deprive the loser of his life and glory, and can also obtain the opponent's weapons and armor. But now Higgs' armor has been burned by the flames of Kane's incarnation, and the weapon has become Sword of Kane fake, which has no use value. After all, these two great swords are just illusions, and they will turn into divine power and dissipate after a while. Now he wants to ask the god of blood and war for his own spoils. If you have the ability, give me a weapon that is no less than the genuine Sword of Kane. Chapter 206 Gift Package. However, whether it was because he couldn't afford it, or because he was looking for a weapon, Bloodhand Kane did not immediately respond to Rohan's reasonable request. Rohan naturally couldn't keep holding Higgs' head like a fool, so he threw the head in his hand away, and looked at the Lord Witch King on the high platform. The duel was over. As the only person who survived, he had undoubtedly proved his strength and glory, as well as his infinite loyalty to Kane. After all, as a dreadlord who could win the incarnation test of Bloodhand Kane and survive the battle, Rohan undoubtedly received Kane's attention and recognition. As we all know, in order to unite the large number of Kane believers in Nagaroth, Lord Witch King has always claimed to be Kane's chosen. So Kane's will equals Lord Witch King. Then Rohan, who was recognized by Bloodhand Kane, should undoubtedly also get the recognition and understanding from Lord Witch King. The Lord Witch King obviously knew this, so he stood up from his seat solemnly, looked at the thousands of nobles around him and shouted, "I declare that Rohan has won this honor duel, and he will get Higgs's wealth and glory, as well as half of the wealth from the Higgs family." Wow, as soon as these words came out, the whole audience was in an uproar. All the nobles looked at the Lord Witch King in the stands in disbelief, and then looked at Rohan in the venue with eager eyes. As a family that has followed the Lord Witch King for 10,000 years, even half of the Higgs family's wealth is enough to shake the economy of the entire Nagaroth region. And now, such a huge fortune has fallen into the hands of a new noble with no background. Facing the envious and jealous eyes of the nobles, Rohan could not help but raise his mouth corners slightly. He bowed gracefully to the Lord Witch King on the high platform and said, "Thank you for the reward, Lord Witch King. I will donate a quarter of this money to the Temple of Kane to thank the great god of Bloodhand for the honor given to me." Hearing that, Rohan took the initiative to propose that part of this wealth would be used to honor himself. The corners of Lord Witch King's mouth under the brass mask slightly raised, and then looked at the nobles around him with dissatisfaction. "Look, this is a good and loyal minister of this king. You nobles who always make trouble, why don't you learn from it?" The nobles who were swept by the Lord Witch King's eyes secretly groaned in their hearts, and could only express their willingness to offer their wealth to the Temple of Kane. It is said that it is presented to the Temple of Kane, but those witch spirits who are only interested in souls and blood will not care about these treasures. In the end, these treasures will fall into the hands of Lord Witch King. Looking at these flattering nobles, the Witch King swung his blood-red cloak and left the arena amid the cheers of the audience, leaving only his burly back. He is the king of a country, and he has a lot of things to deal with next, so it is impossible for him to waste the whole day in the arena. Well, it seems that there is nothing worth watching now. Looking at Rohan, who was looting Higgs's body below, Morotha's eyes flashed a strange color, but she didn't say much, but turned around and chose to leave. Although the little handsome boy who let her play with him has grown into a handsome man with good strength, Morotha did not regret her teasing. The only regret may be that she didn't take the opportunity to lure him into the arms of Slaanesh. Facing Morotha's unconcealed gaze, Rohan did not feel any fear, but was full of confidence in his heart. As the youngest of the 4 chaos gods, the strength of the Lord of Pleasure is not strong compared to the other 3 evil gods. According to the flow of the end time, the weaker Slaanesh will suffer from indigestion due to devouring too many elf souls, and the position of God will eventually be taken away by the Great Horned Rat. According to the current development momentum of the Lady of the Mist, it will take less than 100 years for the hundreds of millions of faith powers to make the Lady of the Mist a god that surpasses the Great Horned Rat. Boom. Seeing that Rohan had finished the battle, Carrot, who had been suspended in the air to watch the show, hurriedly flew to the ground and couldn't help licking Rohan's body with his tongue to see if he was injured. Haha, you should behave more like a lady, Carrot. You are a big girl. It will be easier to find a partner if you are more elegant. How could he know that the reason why the other party rushed over so enthusiastically was because his blood was too tempting and Carrot just wanted to taste the sweetness. Seeing that his master was not injured at all, Carrot did not show any dissatisfaction, but obediently bent down to let Rohan ride on him. It's okay, if you don't lick it this time, there will always be next time. Rohan, Rohan, Rohan. Rohan turned over and rode on the dragon's back, waved to the audience who kept shouting his name, and then left Nagaroth. Look at these citizens. When my prestige spreads to Nagaroth, there will be countless warriors willing to come to my tent. Looking at the citizens who were still waving below, Rohan's face was filled with an excited smile. He knew that the next period would be a good period of peaceful development. 3 months later, Grand Town. Although Grand Town once accommodated thousands of Durachi under Rohan's development, it still lacked some infrastructure. These foreign immigrants can still live in wooden houses built by slaves, which are relatively simple but warm. But Nagaroth has never been a habitable area. Although the elves have adapted to the local climate due to thousands of years of habit, they are not the kind of villains in the game who have no complaints. If it were before, when Anati was alive, he could build shops and open hunting grounds to meet the basic needs of residents. But now, as the news of Rohan's victory over Kane's avatar has spread throughout Nagaroth, tens of thousands of immigrants and wandering warriors have begun to enter Grand Town, which requires the development of infrastructure. They need larger hunting grounds to make clothes, they need more slaves to make houses, and they also need to speed up the acceptance of the faith of the Lady of the Mist. The Mist Temple, which was only a dozen meters high, could not accommodate the growing number of believers. They were eager to build larger and newer statues to commemorate the Lady. In the past, Rohan would not have invested his only hundreds of thousands of gold coins in the huge infrastructure, but now is different. Nearly 100,000 slaves from the Higgs family are enough to fill the gap in labor. 4-H farms built in the Karakarand area have also been allocated to Rohan, which can provide him with a steady supply of food. Most importantly, hundreds of millions of gold coins have been continuously sent to Rohan's small treasury, making him the richest lord of Karandkar. Now I can finally develop with peace of mind. Chapter 207 Revolver, Hand Cannon. Brand new houses were built around Grand Town, and tens of thousands of immigrants joined the ranks of Rohan's citizens, becoming a high quality source of soldiers. As long as there are enough weapons, Rohan can now raise a Durachi army of tens of thousands of people in a short period of time. However, this kind of elf warrior who can only bully the indigenous humans is not what Rohan wants. After all, chaos is the enemy of the future, and everything should be based on fighting chaos. On the towering black tower, Rohan stood on the balcony holding a glass of milk, looking at the thriving town below, and nodded with satisfaction. Although 3 months was a short time, it was enough for Rohan to develop the coastal town into a colorful one. Grand Town, level 4 city population. 24,738 taxes. 24,673, basic income plus 800, level 3 iron ore plus 600, slave output plus 4,000, level 3 port plus 300, buildings. Lord's Farm, Plunder Hall, Exiles Residence, Dragon's Nest, Recruitable, Manticore, Ash Dragon Rider, Mist Temple, Corrosion, -8, Control, +6, Provided Garrison, Silver Mist Guard *480, Silver Mist Hunter *100, with the gift package sent by the Higgs family. Rohan finally built Grand Town into a huge port city. Thousands of Black Ark pirates are setting out from the port in an endless stream, driving pirate ships to plunder the coasts of Ulthuan and Britannia. Arenas and training camps can be seen everywhere in the city. The bloody smell makes those newcomers feel particularly comfortable. After drinking the milk in the wine glass, Rohan put down the glass and turned to enter the portal, ready to go to World of Behemoth. World of Behemoth. Arsenal, everything is going so smoothly. I can finally do some of my own things. Looking at the young ash dragons flying in the clouds, Rohan's mouth corners slightly raised, and then he set his eyes on the huge steel plant in front of him. Countless scholars from the world of Pendor are constantly studying the guns on the table, and at the same time humbly ask the tight local scientists how to use them. That's right, after several months of difficult exploration, the expedition team led by Dario finally found a human settlement on the west coast with the help of the dragons. The humans in the settlement had never suffered a joint attack from the elves and dragons, and chose to lay down their weapons and surrender, and handed over their few scientists. Although they are scientists, due to the lack of systematic learning and guidance, the professional level of these human scientists is quite poor. After all, as the educational core of the ancient Pand Empire, Boshi City has a large number of scholars specializing in mathematics and physics, and their knowledge is far beyond these half-baked people. The knowledge these scientists have is only how to make simple bullets and breech-loading guns, and they don't have the kind of airplanes and cannons that Rohan imagined. However, despite this, Rohan can still discover some value from these people. A young scholar was concentrating on studying the junior high school physics at hand. When he saw Rohan entering the arsenal, he immediately walked up to him excitedly and greeted him. Lord Rohan, the knowledge that these retro people once mastered is simply a miracle. I have never observed the world so clearly. Thank you so much. Calm down, Anson. You may see more wonderful knowledge in the future. Don't get too excited. Looking at the young man with a ruddy face in front of him, Rohan smiled and patted him on the shoulder, then asked curiously, in 3 months, have you researched anything good? Oh, yes, sir. Although we were a little confused about these technologies at the beginning, now we have mastered some of the key points. Anson confidently took out a strange-shaped pistol from his waist and excitedly pulled Rohan to introduce it. Although we haven't figured out how to make those large firearms yet, we can already independently make a revolver by hand. Revolver? It sounds good. Or you can show me how it works. Looking at the pistol in Anson's hand, which was made of various parts, Rohan was full of worries. After all, the style of this thing looked too much like a weapon made by the Greenskins. In addition, the slightly crazy look on Anson's face made Rohan feel particularly uneasy. According to the military supply concept proposed by Rohan, the first element of a weapon is stability and easy maintenance, followed by the pursuit of firepower and power. Will this thing really not explode? Compared with the worried Rohan, Anson had no safety concerns. He first took out 3 handmade bullets. Are those bullets? Exclamation mark. Seeing Anson struggling to load 3 large steel bullets into the cylinder, Rohan hurriedly stopped Anson, took out a rebirth pill, and handed it to him, saying, put this thing in your mouth first, and eat it quickly, if something unexpected happens, understand? Don't worry, sir, I have confidence in my skills. However, Anson didn't even look at the pill handed over by Rohan. After a confident smile, he held the gun with both hands and aimed at a set of plate armor 50 meters away. Bang! A burst of black smoke spewed out from the muzzle of the gun, and Anson's body suddenly retreated backwards, scaring Rohan to rush forward to hold him and check his body. Fortunately, Anson's hands were just shaking, and there was no explosion accident as Rohan thought, which made him relieved. Look, sir. I said my weapon must have worked. Following the direction of Anson's shaking hand, Rohan noticed that the bullet just now actually hit the plate armor and blew a big hole of about 5 centimeters on it. Is this a bullet? This is clearly a bomb. Surprised, Rohan excitedly snatched the revolver from Anson's hand, the hand cannon, and fired another shot at the plate armor in the distance with one hand. Bang! Hiss this recoil. It's so cool. Feeling the slight numbness from the tiger's mouth, and smelling the smell of gunpowder in the air, Rohan unconsciously smiled at the corner of his mouth. This is called a gun. What is the thing Dario used to play with? Although Rohan's shot did not hit the plate armor, it left a bowl-sized crater on the wall next to it, which was enough to satisfy Rohan. However, it seemed that due to the 2 consecutive shots, this purely handmade revolver seemed to have reached a certain point, and even the barrel was slightly loose. Faced with this situation, Anson could not help but take the revolver with some embarrassment, and after forcing the last bullet out, he explained, "I'm sorry, sir. I made this weapon a few days ago, and it has not been tested before. This situation is purely accidental." Chapter 208, The Plunderer. Watching Anson put all the pistol parts into his arms, Rohan could only sigh helplessly. Although this explosive pistol is powerful, even he, who has the body of a living saint, can feel a slight numbness in his palm, not to mention the soldiers with mortal bodies. Perhaps in the future, when Anson can make this weapon more perfect, Rohan will consider equipping the army with it. As for now, although this arsenal has just been built, it should be possible to imitate some of the suggested gunpowder weapons, right? After all, in the future unification war of Pend Continent, these relatively cheap and easier to be equipped on a large scale firearms are the war weapons that Rohan needs most. Anson, in addition to these things, how about the other weapons I asked you to prepare, such as muskets and cannons similar to Barclays? Facing Rohan's question, Anson's face showed a trace of difficulty, and then he began to complain, "My lord, this world is too desolate. Maybe these people once had powerful industry and technology, but now it has completely fallen into ruins. We can only use the existing gunpowder. Therefore, we need more manpower to rebuild the ruins of those factories, and more guards to resist those wasteland looters." Looters? Are there other survivors? Hearing Anson talking about the existence of looters in this world, Rohan's brows frowned all of a sudden. He had heard about this matter a long time ago. These bastards riding motorcycles and holding old submachine guns have long been a headache for the leader of the Silver Dragon Knights, Eren. It's not because these looters are so strong, but because these guys never go in groups and are difficult to be annihilated at once. They wandered in teams of more than a dozen people, hunting down the engineering teams sent by Eren, causing extremely serious waste of materials and manpower. Unfortunately, all their caves were built in tunnels and caves, and there were several damn heavy machine guns blocking the door, so even the Ash Dragon riders did not dare to attack rashly. After thinking for a moment, a strange light gradually lit up in Rohan's eyes, and he murmured to the Ash Dragons playing and fighting in the air, "This is just as troublesome as the Damratman. Then we can take this opportunity to study how to conduct underground warfare." A few weeks later, on a ridge somewhere, boss, look, these guys have really rich supplies, even fresh beef. They don't look like people making a living in the wasteland. Yeah, boss, I think we should attack their factory. They must have hidden more good things. In the cave, a dozen men in leather jackets and sunglasses were excitedly looking at the fat and lard on the ground, and excitedly looked at the boss. They are a famous local motorcycle gang, with nearly 1,000 motorcycles and riders, as well as a large number of weapons and ammunition. Once upon a time, they lived in a cave without sunlight every day, just like Quinn, a survivor living in an abandoned castle, living on mushrooms, and robbing the survivors' camps around them. But just a few months ago, the flying dragons hovering in the sky suddenly disappeared, leaving only ashes and scorched earth. Just when they were puzzled, some horse teams wearing strange armor and holding crossbows suddenly appeared on the surrounding roads. The most important thing is that these teams are full of supplies they urgently need. The bikers, who were not good at all, simply went all out and attacked these teams on motorcycles, shooting these unfortunate guys with submachine guns. Although the guards in the team fought desperately, they were easily solved by snipers arranged by them. Some survivors tried to escape on horseback, but no matter how fast they ran, they could not be as fast as motorcycles, so they were killed by the bikers. And just yesterday, their team successfully ambushed a team full of fuel and food, and it took a day to bring all these things back. Looking at the various foods on the ground that smelled of meat, the leader of the motorcycle gang sat calmly on his leather jacket, smoking a cigarette, while touching the buttocks of the woman in his arms and shouted, "Boys, call all the cooks up. We will have a good meal these days, and then find an opportunity to attack the factory." "Great." The skinny riders shouted excitedly, and several of them were so hungry that they had already cut off a few pieces of raw meat with a knife and tasted them carefully with tears in their eyes. They had not tasted meat for several years, so they did not even notice that dozens of barrels filled with fat and gasoline were scattered aside by them. All the idle people ran to the kitchen, smelled a nostalgic meat aroma in the air, and looked at the big steaks sizzling with oil, and swallowed their saliva. Even the sentry standing guard at the door with a machine gun smelled the fragrance in the cave, and turned his head to look at the kitchen. It smells so good. I'm tired of mushrooms and batter. I must have a big meal today. If I remember correctly, there seemed to be a few bottles of wine in the spoils from the previous battles. It would be even better if I could have a small sip. The sentries began to brag to each other. Since it was already dusk, they didn't notice the shadows slowly approaching at the foot of the mountain. A sentry was sitting on a chair, looking at the members of the motorcycle gang who had already started to feast, and couldn't help but sigh. It smells so good. It should be our turn in a while, right? Don't worry, it's not your turn. Puff. A sound of flesh being torn came from behind, and a severe pain came from the chest, making the sentry want to scream, but his mouth was covered. Looking at the pure black hand that pierced his chest, holding his beating heart in the palm, the sentry used up his last bit of strength to look back. A black shadow that seemed like an illusion was standing behind him, with no face, no hair, only an imaginable coldness and pain. What? Another sentry seemed to have noticed the movement of the black shadow, and when he was about to raise his gun to check, he was suddenly pierced through the heart by the sharp claws. Hello, have you eaten? This is the fresh beef I sent specially. You should not have let me down, right? Looking at the sentry who was struggling on his arm, Rohan smiled and crushed the heart on the golden claw blade, and then pulled out his bloody left hand. Blood dripped slowly from the golden claws, and the claws that flashed with a trace of golden lightning were not stained with any blood, and were still so perfect. Claw of holy glory, the sacred claw forged by the god of craftsmen, Val, is made of a piece of gold that has stolen the light of the sun. It is the favorite collection of Bloody Cain. Features: melee attack plus 20, armor break damage plus 200, never defeated, good at fighting demons. Skill: Claw of Zhuangzi. The souls of all flesh and blood killed by the holy blade will be eternally burned, and eventually their souls will be shattered. Melee attack plus 15, melee defense plus 10, duration 60 seconds, cooldown 30 days. Chapter 209, Suppressing Bandits. After shaking off the blood on his hands, Rohan turned his eyes to the golden claws on his left hand, with a faint smile on his lips. It should be said that, although he had never seen what the hand of the gods of the Lizardman War Master, Kujaya, looked like, his golden left hand was definitely handsome enough. Most importantly, Bloodhand Cain seemed to see Rohan's determination to fight against the Chaos Demon, and the Claw of Holy Glory given to him was the strongest magic weapon against the demon. As a divine weapon with active skills, as long as Rohan activates the Claw of Zhuangzi skill when fighting the demon's soul will be damaged when hit by any of his weapons, and finally be exiled helplessly. Although Rohan is not sure whether this exile is permanent, it does not affect his confidence in his own strength. With such a weapon, even if he faces a stronger Wanbian demon lord again, Rohan is confident that he can kill him. The noise at the entrance of the cave soon attracted the members of the motorcycle gang who were eating. They found that there was a strange man with a golden claw on his left hand and a strange cylinder in his right hand standing at the entrance of the cave. Who are you? I am. What's the use of knowing so much for a dying man? You should just go on your way peacefully. Rohan would not give these bastards who killed his soldiers a good face, let alone have a calm communication. Looking at these motorcycle gangs holding stakes in their hands, Rohan decisively aimed the cylinder in his right hand at these motorcycle gangs, and then pulled the trigger. Puff. The orange-red fire dragon instantly sprayed out of the barrel, instantly swallowing the motorcycle gangs who came out to check the situation into the sea of fire. The motorcycle gangs wailed in pain, and they tried to roll on the ground to put out the flames, but it didn't work. A self-proclaimed smart biker picked up the bucket next to him and poured it on himself. Unexpectedly, the fire was not relieved, but spread to the water surface. With the last few wriggles, the bikers, whose skin had turned into charcoal, fell to the ground one after another, and turned into ashes along with the scorching sea of fire. Looking at the ashes floating in the air, Rohan looked at the flamethrower in his hand, and couldn't help but exclaimed, "Anson is really a genius. I didn't expect that he could really extract the flamethrower gland of the ash dragon, and he succeeded." After checking the exhausted iron can on the flammer thrower, Rohan took out a new iron can from his waist and installed it, then blew it into the mouth, and walked into the cave. This flammer thrower was specially commissioned by him to Anson, so that it could suppress the opponent's dimensional flammer thrower in the future tunnel war with the Radman. Although it seems that this flammer thrower still has many problems such as short range and insufficient ammunition, it is obviously much more reliable than the previous bomb pistol. Playing a little tune from his hometown, Rohan turned a corner and came to the kitchen and living area of the biker gang. Here, several heavy machine guns and dozens of submachine guns were pointed at him. At this time, the leader of the biker gang was holding a real revolver and pointing it at Rohan. Seeing that the other party dared to break into his cave alone, he praised him. "I don't care where you come from, but you dare to come here alone. I have to say that I admire your courage. Why not?" The sharp blade pierced his heart, and the shadow dancer went out again, constantly waving the double blades in his hands and dancing in the crowd, cutting off the soft throats of those bikers. Blood flowers kept splashing on the surrounding stone walls. The flammer thrower in Rohan's hand ignited the grease and gasoline of the surrounding opponents, illuminating Rohan's indifferent face. Just kidding. Rohan has never been a person who likes to talk nonsense, especially in this situation, where I have the advantage. He will not waste words with a dying person. The flames seemed to have a spirit, and took the initiative to bypass Rohan's body. They surrounded him like a blooming flower, as if they wanted to get close to Rohan, but were afraid of hurting him. Since the fuel in the flammer thrower was all composed of glands in the body of the ash dragon, Rohan, who possessed the dragon heart, would not be hurt by these dragon flames at all. "No. Save me. Please let us go. None of this has anything to do with us." Looking at the rapidly spreading fire, some women hiding in the cave issued a terrified call for help to Rohan, but Rohan turned around and left. The aftermath team was about to arrive, and with the barrier he left behind, these women would be rescued soon, as long as they hid inside. Of course, if they were really stupid enough to try to leave the barrier and then use their bodies to escape from the sea of fire composed of dragon flames, then Rohan could only sigh that the female knight was very brave. Coming out of the cave, watching the sunset shining on the mountains that were gradually growing shallow grass, Rohan smiled and left the cave. There were dozens of motorcycle gangs of different sizes, and this was just one of the medium-sized ones. Under his command, the guards were carrying dozens of flammer throwers made by the arsenal, and heading towards the caves hidden in the mountains. It won't be long before these annoying bikers will be completely solved, and then they can slowly develop the weapons industry, and prepare to unify the continent of Pendor. Today is a good day for barbecue, a good day 1 year later. The continent of Pendor. It has been more than a year since Barclay's Legion landed in Seawan City. In this short year, the Barclay people have experienced all kinds of unimaginable hardships. The first problem is the planting problem. Because Rohan asked the Lady of the Mist to withdraw the blessing of the Seawan City area, this land once again fell into the erosion of the evil goddess of the snake cult. Although the Barclay people successfully planted some crops through fertilizer technology, such consumption is obviously not something the Imperial Expeditionary Force can afford. Secondly, it's the elves' offensive. Fire. Boom boom boom. On the plain outside Seawan City, the Barclays were huddled in the trenches, fearfully avoiding the fierce artillery fire above their heads. Feeling the pain in his bones from the earthquake caused by the bombing, an officer couldn't help but spit out the dirt that fell into his mouth. With such a fierce bombardment, those who didn't know would think that the artillery positions of their own legion were bombed by mistake. Sir, where did these elves get so many advanced artillery? Why do I feel that their artillery is more powerful than ours? Faced with the innocence in the eyes of his own soldiers, the officer could only smile bitterly and touched the empty water bag on his waist. Supplies had not been delivered for several days, and the soldiers' ammunition was almost used up. It was simply a crushing situation that the Empire had never suffered. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210 Trench Warfare. Keep firing, even if you have to destroy the barrels. On the hillside far from Seoul City, dozens of strangely shaped cannons were aiming at the trenches outside the city and bombarding continuously, raising clouds of dust. If the humans of the Sigma Empire saw this scene, they would probably be horrified. Not only because the style of these cannons is very similar to their mortars, but also because the gunners of these cannons are elves who were once considered old-fashioned and conservative. These elf warriors wearing black iron breastplates and rapiers on their waists did not prepare for battle with shields in their hands as they did in the past, nor did they form a shield wall to prepare to meet the enemy. On the contrary, these elves were skillfully stuffing spherical bombs into the barrels, lighting the fuses at the same time, and throwing shells at the human positions. Looking at the Barclay position that had become a sea of fire in the distance, every elf had a cruel grin on his face. Although they were proud and unwilling to use this kind of human weapons at first, if these weapons were made by elves, they would still consider it. Of course, it was definitely not, because this thing was more powerful and fun than the Reaper crossbow. Boom boom boom, the sky full of shells hit the city and positions of the Barclay people fiercely, mixed with a few incendiary bombs, turning the entire city into a sea of fire. The poor citizens were desperately hiding everywhere. Some of the survivors among them had not yet recovered from the bombing of the Barclay fleet and were bombed by the elves again. Looking at the Barclay people who were struggling under the flames, Rohan's face was also filled with a satisfied smile. After more than a year of preparation, he finally formed a new army, consisting of 3,000 penned musketeers and 240 various artillery pieces. The musket named Pen 1 uses a barrel forged by elves and is made of fine walnut wood from the grain and grass world. Moreover, the styles of these muskets all combined the advantages of the muskets of the Sigma Empire and the Barclay Empire, and with the excellent craftsmanship of the elves, the performance far exceeded the muskets made by humans. As the artillery fire gradually stopped, there was only a sea of fire on the Barclays' position, and some of the defenders who poked their heads out. Obviously, the Barclays' trenches were well dug. At least there was no landslide that buried the soldiers. Looking at the 3,000 pan warriors behind him who were carrying new muskets and ready to go, Rohan also pulled out the bolt pistol hanging on his waist and shouted, "Soldiers, in order to spread the glory of the Lady of the Mist throughout Pand, attack, charge." The Barclay soldiers who climbed out of the trenches under the whip of the officers had not yet recovered, and then they were horrified to see the black dragon flags all over the mountains and plains, and they hurriedly raised their guns and prepared to shoot. The officers also came to the trenches and also pulled out the sabers at their waists, feeling an unspeakable bitterness in their mouths. Their artillery positions had been destroyed by the dragons in the previous battle, and the fleet at sea had also encountered a terrifying giant warship, which could not provide artillery support at all. Free fire, never let them get close. Several officers waved their sabers angrily. Compared with the soldiers wearing black cloth armor around them, these officers wearing gorgeous plate armor were particularly conspicuous. Although they learned how to use trenches in the battle with the elves, it was a pity that they did not learn to hide their identities. The reason why Rohan dared to wear dazzling silver armor on the battlefield was that under the blessing of powerful attributes, ordinary bullets could not penetrate his flesh at all. But it was obvious that these officers did not have the same strong strength as Rohan and had no way to resist bullets. Before these officers could give new orders, their heads exploded like broken watermelons in an instant. Scarlet blood and snow white brain matter scattered on the surrounding Barclay soldiers, scaring them to scream. It's as easy as shooting a target. Maybe I should try to fight a demon. In the bushes hundreds of meters away from Barclay's position, Anj sneered and put down the breech-loading percussion gun in his hand. He pulled the bolt elegantly and loaded the bullet into it. A series of small blue magic circles lit up from the bolt, instantly giving the bullet an unmatched magic power. As Rohan's personal guard, Anj and other Silver Mist hunters all replaced the latest percussion guns, which were built according to the technical drawings left by those scientists. The gun bodies are all plated with expensive Isolama silver. With the blessing of the Lady of the Mist, these purely handmade percussion guns are powerful enough to even penetrate dragon scales. Of course, such an elegant and gorgeous musket is naturally very expensive. Just to equip the magic silver musket of the 100 guards, Rohan spent at least more than 100,000 gold coins, which is very expensive. Of course, such an expensive price naturally brings unimaginable power and terrible accuracy. Under the decapitation sniping of the SS, the officers of Barclay could not leave their trenches at all. They could only watch the trench defense line being breached and had to engage in close combat. In the trenches, several Barclay soldiers were taking advantage of the terrain to sneak attack the penned musketeers who were unfamiliar with the trenches. One of the officers was using a saber to execute the seriously injured penned soldier on the ground. Then he noticed Rohan, who was slaughtering the Barclay soldiers with his claws in the distance, so he hurriedly growled, "See that guy? He is the leader of the elves. Everyone aim at him and fire. Aim. Fire." Pa pa pa. Dozens of lead bullets were shot towards Rohan's position. Every Barclay soldier holding a gun had expectations in his eyes, hoping to deal with this terrible existence. However, before these bullets could get close to Rohan, they were blocked by a light blue translucent barrier and finally rolled to the ground. I didn't expect there were a few more here. The gunshot attracted Rohan's attention. He crushed the struggling officer's head, then raised the rune sword flashing with blue lightning, and walked towards the Barclay soldiers. I don't know if it was because the claw of the holy light was once a collection of blood hand cane. Rohan now likes this bloody fighting style more and more. Seeing this terrifying elf, who was already 2 meters tall, walking towards him, the officer hurriedly pulled out his pistol and fired at Rohan, then gritted his teeth and shouted, "Hurry up and put on the bayonet. Everyone, go up with me to hold him back. You, go and request the fleet to support them, and let them bomb the trench immediately." Yes. The lucky guy whose name was called hurriedly ran to the back of the trench. The shouts and sounds of flesh tearing behind him made his eyes slightly wet. It's a pity that no Barclay people are destined to leave the trench alive today. Snap, I heard that Carol is holding a hunting event recently. Maybe I should challenge myself to fight the harpy. Chapter 211 Bloody Street Fight. You are brave enough to die bravely, but you are not my opponent at all. The claws on his left hand were like 5 sharp daggers, directly piercing the Barclay officer who tried to chop him. Rohan threw away the corpse hanging on his claws, looked at the Barclay soldiers who were pointing their bayonets at him, and their slightly trembling legs, and persuaded them, "Put down your weapons and surrender. Convert to the faith of the Lady of the Mist, join our team, and dispel the darkness and chaos of ignorance together. Don't even think about it." A Barclay soldier with a broken will had obviously lost his mind, raised his musket, and launched a bayonet charge at Rohan. However, how could this salty fish charge before death pose any threat to Rohan? The holy claw directly grasped the bayonet stabbed by the opponent, and then crushed it. Looking at the Barclay soldier who was stunned in the place, Rohan raised the rune sword in his right hand, and chopped it down directly, cutting the soldier in half from top to bottom. "Damn pointy-eared alien, I'll fight you." That's right, hold on, everyone. The bombing of the fleet is coming soon. We will definitely defeat these elves. Charge. For Barclay, for the Emperor. Witnessing the officers and comrades dying in front of them, the remaining Barclay soldiers shouted and rushed forward, trying to pierce Rohan with their numerical advantage. Looking at these Barclay soldiers who were struggling to shake the trees, Rohan shook his head helplessly, then raised the rune sword in his hand, and chopped out several sword ki. The sword light flashed, and pools of minced meat slowly slid off the bodies of these soldiers and finally fell to the ground. Fleet bombing. Your fleet may be in a worse situation than yours, but you still expect them to launch a bombing? Rohan jumped onto the trench, and looked at the completely collapsed Barclay's defense line. He slowly shifted his gaze to the distant sea level. A huge ship 8 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide was floating on the sea, constantly firing magic shells of various colors, bombarding the surrounding Barclay Empire's ironclad warships. That was the giant Black Ark that Rohan had repaired and expanded, a third-world conqueror. At the same time, dozens of Ash Dragon riders were riding the Ash Dragons under their crotches, wantonly breathing at the Barclay warships that lacked anti-aircraft firepower. The entire sea surface was reduced to a sea of fire. The steel decks that the Barclay warships once prided themselves on could not withstand the magic turrets of the Black Ark. More than a dozen warships had already capsized in the sea. Even if there were ironclad swords that were lucky enough to rush into the range, they would soon be horrified to find that there were hundreds of artillery pieces piled on both sides of the Black Ark. Since the huge black ark hardly sways on the sea, Rohan was so crazy that he installed all 48-pound giant cannons with amazing firepower. No need to check, about 203mm caliber. Most importantly, since there are several more female sorcerers under his command, these cannons are also equipped with special shells with magic runes, which further enhance their penetration and explosive power. Even the strongest god of Con, the bloodthirsty demon, cannot resist the salvo of so many large caliber cannons, not to mention the warships built by Van Arn. This thing is really fun, but it's a pity that these short-lived warships are not enough to fight, otherwise I would like to play for a while longer. At the front of the warship, Mekasha, who had sworn allegiance to Rohan personally, was standing in a magic circle and excitedly manipulating the magic circle. Boom boom, a black ball of light imitating an ominous aura gathered at the top of the magic circle, and then turned into an evil dimensional lightning, and struck the Barclay ironclad warship that was fleeing in the distance. Looking at the mushroom cloud rising from the sea in the distance, Mekasha looked around expectantly, and then she found that all of Barclay's warships had sunk. Some of the surviving Barclay sailors were trying to swim towards the coast, but were sucked into the seabed by the whirlpool caused by the passing of the Black Ark. Although she could not cast too strong magic due to the lack of the blessing of the Lady of the Mist, Mekasha could still feel the dead souls around her. That was the unwilling cry of the souls of the Barclay Navy. Ah, what a sweet air. If I were in Nagaroth, I would definitely sacrifice these souls to Shashi. Shashi, the source of death spells, turn around and prepare to set off for the harbor of Seon City. We will support Lord Rohan. Looking at Mekasha, who was doing something wrong, Dario, who was appointed as the temporary captain, couldn't help but frown, and then put away the musket in his hand, and left the deck. As the first old warrior to follow Rohan, Dario did not trust Mekasha, a sorceress who had a close connection with Morathi. In his opinion, these sorceresses were not loyal to Rohan sincerely, but were attracted by the money from the other world. Once Lord Rohan and Morathi come into conflict, these sorceresses will definitely betray him and cause heavy casualties to the army. It is even possible that these sorceresses will cause damage to the colony under the arrangement of Morathi, and it is not impossible that they will eventually cause a chaos invasion. With this idea in mind, Dario turned his eyes to the Durachi warriors, who were the first to follow Rohan, and made a decision in his heart. Now Lord Rohan's army is full of warriors of various races, including elves and humans, giants and flying dragons. Although such a diversified army composition can indeed enhance the combat effectiveness of the army, in such a mixed situation, there will eventually be some people with bad intentions who will have the intention of rebellion. It seems that it is time to form a special department that is only loyal to Lord Rohan and specializes in investigating and punishing those who are traitors. In Seon City, the brutal street fighting is still going on, but it is better to say that it is a battle against the ruins than a street fighting. The firm belief in atheism and the excellent national system made Barclay's soldiers willing to fight to the death for the empire. When the bullets were all used up, they threw bombs, and when the bombs were all lost, they used bayonets, trying to use all means to kill the new Pand army entering the city. Boring. Chaos demons know that they can't beat them and run quickly. Why do you humans who can only live once insist on it? With one sword, he nailed the Barclay soldier who tried to die with him with a grenade to the ground. Rohan shook off the blood on his sword and looked at the Barclay people who formed a circle on the coastline. It must be said that, although Rohan only spent nearly a week fighting from Boshi City to Seon City, he still wasted a lot of ammunition. The artillery shells that had been stored for half a year were basically used up, and the new army's musket ammunition was consumed in countless quantities, which was really painful. You can mock us as much as you want, elves. One day, the wrath of the Barclay Empire will fall on you and destroy everything you cherish. Looking at these Barclay people who would rather die than surrender, Rohan couldn't help but shook his head, raised his rune sword, and pointed it at them, muttering, "Soul tempering." Chapter 212, Gathering of Nations. The war in Seon City was almost a foregone conclusion, and all the Barclay people were massacred. During this year, the Barclay people spent a lot of effort to defend Seon City, the only city of the Barclay people in Penda. However, even such a solid fortress was easily destroyed by the elves in just 1 week. This forced other countries on Penda to start thinking about their relationship with the elves. They used to think that, although these elves were cruel, they should be isolated like the older elves, and would not pose much threat to the noble forces of Penda. However, the fall of the Bacchus Empire and the massacre of the Barclay Expeditionary Force all show the danger and aggressiveness of these elves. This is no longer an ordinary elf. All countries should unite and strike hard together. After being rejected in public by Rohan last time, King Ulrich, the ruler of Solian who thought he was the orthodox of Penda, lost face. After learning about the disastrous defeat of the Barclay Expeditionary Force in the Battle of Seowan City, the angry Lion King immediately wrote an envelope to the remaining self-proclaimed kings of Penda. In the letter, he used fierce words to accuse the elves of encroaching on the land of Penda, and at the same time, demanded that all the kings of Penda should gather in Solian, the capital of the kingdom of Solian. For a time, the entire continent of Penda was in turmoil. Through word of mouth among travelers, the people of the entire continent of Penda had already known that the war was coming. Of course, King Ulrich, who was ambitious at this time, did not know that, while he was summoning the coalition forces, Rohan was preparing a big job for him. 1 month later, Solian is the capital of the ancient Penda Empire. Solian has a wide and thick wall several kilometers long, and hundreds of cannons stand on the battlements. Why don't you put these cannons in the frontline castle? What a joke. The role of the frontline castle is only to protect those untouchables, while Solian is used to protect the noble king. Not only that, after referring to the battle report of Seowan City, the nobles of Solian built several high towers behind the city wall, which were full of large crossbows against flying dragons. It can be said that the lessons of blood and tears of the Barclay people set a template for the countries of Solian and even the entire continent, a template for how to resist the invasion of elves. Almost every noble who came to Solian was shocked by the city's tight defense. Of course, there were also sneers. Look at these cannons with patterns and gorgeous gold-plated armor. It seems that the stingy Ulrich is trying to show us his power. King Vidis, the king of the Ferdsvain kingdom from the west coast of Penda, looked at the luxurious houses and soldiers in Solian with envy, his eyes full of greed. As a scary mercenary, who once came to Penda with the Barks, he naturally inherited his ancestors' habit of plundering. As the most luxurious city in the entire continent, gold can be seen almost everywhere in Solian, and it seems to be as prosperous as a paradise on earth. Welcome all kings to gather under the great lion flag of High King Ulrich, a large plaque with a gold-rimmed flower, hung on the top of the city gate. Seeing the undisguised arrogance and disgusting complacency, King Vidis couldn't help but sneer. Humph, if I hadn't seen those beggars who were expelled from the city begging in the nearby villages, I'm afraid I would have thought that this city was really built by Ulrich. In the eyes of other kings of Penda, Ulrich was just a lucky guy who was eager for success. Since most of the precious gold mines and ebony steel mines were located in the territory of the fierce lion, Ulrich could squander this gift from God without restraint. Welcome, welcome, warm welcome. The marble-paved avenue was filled with fully armored soldiers holding long spears, blocking the crowd who were throwing flowers at King Vidis. However, King Vidis's eyes were so sharp that he could tell at a glance that these healthy people were sent by the nobles to act. As King Vidis's personal guards entered the city, the cheering people immediately stopped, obviously saving their energy for the next cheer. When they arrived in front of the castle covered with bright red carpet, several lion knights carrying two-handed swords blocked King Vidis's way and said, King Vidis from Ferdsvain, His Majesty Ulrich has been waiting for a long time. Please hand over your weapons to us for safekeeping, and then enter the castle under our guidance. When they heard that these lion knights wanted them to hand over their weapons, the royal guards and shield maidens following King Vidis reached for their battle axes at their waists. They didn't believe Ulrich's promise at all, especially since this was still someone else's territory. How could they protect the king without weapons? What's more, this was the territory of Solian. Who knew if this banquet to summon all the kings of Penda was a scam? Even the beard of King Vidis trembled with anger. He pulled out the King of Furwitz's battle axe from his waist, which symbolized his status, and roared, You want us to appear in front of Ulrich without any defense? Dream on. This is definitely a scam. Hey, put down your weapons immediately, you barbarians from overseas. Looking at these angry Furwitz people, the Lion Knights also held their hands on the hilts of their swords. After all, the two sides were long-standing enemies, so there was no mutual understanding at all. Hearing the ridicule of the Lion Knight, the already angry King Vidus immediately drew out the battle axe from his waist, ready to teach these weak civilized people a lesson. Calm down, Vidus, you old thing. You are always so impatient when doing things. Just as the two sides were on the verge of a fight, a strong voice came from the back, and then a blue figure entered the castle one after another. Unlike the Lion Knights wearing full body plate armor and the Furwitz guards wearing plate chain composite armor, these soldiers wearing blue cloak armor were holding long composite bows and looking at the people present with the same vigilance. The knights in the lead, wearing plate armor, were engraved with exquisite flying dragon patterns. They were dragon knights from the Stern Crow realm. King Vidus sniffed pretentiously, then retracted the battle axe in his hand, laughed and looked at him sarcastically. Haha, it's Gregory, right? I heard that you in the Stern Crow realm were evenly matched with the Misty Mountain man named Murderer. When did you become so weak? Same here. I heard that your country was also plundered by a female army calling itself the Fakavia Expeditionary Force, and the men were castrated and used as slaves. I hope it won't be you who suffers next time. Chapter 213 Ulrich's Panic. Hearing the ridicule of women in Gregory's words, several Valkyries and Shield Maiden drew out the dragon bone axes from their waists angrily, but were stopped by King Vidus. Calm down, girls, I can do it too. Looking at the dragon knights with dragon patterns embroidered on their chests behind them, King Vidus cleared his throat, stepped forward and hugged Gregory's neck and laughed. Hey, isn't this a dragon knight? I haven't seen you for a few days. You are so angry? What do you mean? Look, the elves are riding real dragons, but you, the so-called dragon knight, don't even have a real dragon. Why don't you change your name to Insect Knight? Ha 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 ha. Hearing that Vidus dared to insult the glory of his ancestors, Gregory's eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't rush to reply. As two countries bordering each other, the hatred between the two countries is naturally not something that can be explained in a few words, let alone verbal insults. If it weren't for the fact that the two countries were in a truce, Gregory, a native of Penda, would have chopped off the bastard's head with a sword. Just as the two were about to continue arguing, a figure full of arrogance suddenly came from the castle and said to them, just curse a few words. You two are both self-proclaimed kings of a country, so you should show some king's majesty. On the balcony, Ulrich was holding a glass of wine and looking at the two kings below, which instantly made them think of a unified foreign policy. After all, the dispute between their two countries was just a dispute over some castles, which could not hurt their core interests at all. But Ulrich, this old guy, is the King Zuin of Key, and he is also the kind who is both inexperienced and playful. Almost all the forces on Penda have had conflicts with him. Let them come in with weapons. I think these traitors from the north and the barbarians from the west coast should know some etiquette. Ulrich's arrogance comparable to that of the elves made the two kings deeply indignant. They were originally going to discuss the dispute with the elves together, but now it seems that only the two countries can talk about these things. As for Ulrich, may he live long. Entering the castle, the two saw Ulrich sitting on the throne of the Pend Empire, waving to them hypocritically and inviting them. Please take a seat, kings who have come from afar. I think you are tired of smoked fish and bear meat. Would you like to try the steak and fine wine from the plains? You talk so sweetly, Ulrich. One day you will die because of your mouth. Looking at the sumptuous feast on the table, King Vidus did not hesitate to sit down on the chair, grabbed a piece of fatty steak with his bare hands, and stuffed it into his mouth. Gregory, who was born into an orthodox noble family, was relatively elegant. While cutting steak with a knife and fork, he asked Ulrich, where is Bahad Khan Katan? His country is adjacent to the elves' territory. This meeting on the elves should be the most concerned, right? I don't know. Maybe he's still on the way. After all, they are nomads. It doesn't matter if they set off late on horseback. Faced with this question, King Ulrich didn't care at all. He held this meeting only to declare his dominance, and then the issue of the elves. After a good meal, the three kings could finally start discussing the issue of the elves. Gregory, who was relatively rational, spoke first. He looked at Ulrich who was tasting wine on the throne, and asked with some doubt, the war report of Siouan City has been spread through the Red Brotherhood. The elves have a warship as huge as an island and thousands of various cannons. Is it true? It's true. There is almost no city wall on this continent that can withstand such an artillery attack, of course, except for my Sarlean city. Ulrich on the throne shook his wine glass. Although he was a bit of a prodigal, he also knew that his enjoyment was based on safety. The entire Sarlean city was built by him. The cannons on the dozens of meters high walls were enough to shoot targets thousands of meters away, which could completely suppress the elves' artillery fire. Even in the worst case, he could defend Sarlean city with its back to the river and farms, and win the war through the supply of the river. Seeing that Ulrich seemed indifferent to the affairs of the elves, King Vidis put down the stake in his hand and complained with his mouth full of oil. Why don't you say something, old Ulrich? Your territory borders the territory of the elves. Maybe you will be the next one to be attacked. Don't worry, compared to the distance between Boshi City and Lycian territory to me, Siouan City is closer to New Gal. They can't go far away. Shaking the wine glass in his hand, Ulrich's face was full of a confident smile, and then he suggested to the two kings in the audience, the elves' offensive is swift. I think we should fully support the battle between the Principality of Char and the elves, and transfer the noise of war to the arid desert. Although King Vidis looked barbaric, he was the first to get what Ulrich meant, so he slapped the table and roared excitedly, that's right, humans will never surrender to the evil elves, until the last Char bleeds. I agree, but the Stern Crow realm, located at the northernmost end of the continent, cannot really help the Char Principality in the southernmost part, so we will provide all support except military support. Just as the kings were discussing how to move the war to the desert territory of the Char Principality, a stern lion knight wearing heavy plate armor suddenly rushed into the palace hall in panic, and then fell to the ground. The kings turned their eyes to the knight. Knowing that they were allowed in, when they were in a meeting, it showed that the matter was quite urgent. The surrounding lion knights hurriedly helped the knight on the ground, but the knight threw his helmet aside without caring about his image, and said with horror, "It's bad, your majesty." The Char Principality announced that it would give up all resistance to the elves, and the whole country would enter a defenseless state. What? Ulrich on the throne stood up suddenly, ignoring the wine spilled on him, his eyes full of panic. Even the king stood up in surprise, helped the knight to his seat and patiently asked about the situation, wanting to know what happened. But Ulrich couldn't hear any sound at this time. The reason why he wanted to trap the war in the territory of the Principality of Dexia was not only because of the desert environment of the Principality of Dexia, but also because he wanted to trap the war in the desert. If the Principality of Dexia gave up resistance, it's bad, I'm the front line. For a moment, he could even vaguely perceive the malicious eyes of the other two kings. Chapter 214, God Killing. Toba, the capital of the Dexia Principality. The Dexia Principality will sign a friendly alliance agreement with the elves, aiming to repair the relationship between the two races, increase bilateral trade, and the highest leader of the principality, the tall Bahad Khan Katan, was humiliated and placed on a small chair, reading the surrender statement in a frustrated manner. The once most elite Khan's guards, the Wind Riders, have also been destroyed. Their heads were also chopped off and surrounded on the city walls with sharp spears, which was terrifying. All citizens were required to watch this speech. They were horrified and pulled out of the room by these iron-clad elves, and then forced to come to the central square. The flying dragons in the sky and the dozens of terrifying giants outside the city with iron hammers in their hands and full plate armor all subverted their three views. Is this really the world they are familiar with? Rohan stood in the center of the square, feeling the eyes of these citizens looking at him, with no emotion on his handsome face. After the previous battle with Kane's incarnation, he felt more and more that his strength was insufficient, so he had to unify the Penda continent as soon as possible and complete the artifact quest. As Bahad Khan Kadan's speech ended, Rohan slowly walked to the front of the stage and shouted to the terrified crowd below, "People of Char, I know you should know nothing about the current situation, so let me tell you what happened. My dragons have turned Sinjil into a sea of fire. Ashkoman and Alder are both within the range of my warship's gunfire. As long as I give an order, the entire Char will be reduced to ruins." Hearing this, all the citizens swallowed their saliva in fear, and some timid female citizens were even scared to tears by Rohan's cruelty. As early as a month ago, some small islands near Siouan City had witnessed the massacre of the Siouan City battle. The entire city was reduced to a sea of fire, blood dyed most of the sea red, and corpses were thrown on the sea at will, which once filled the entire bay with sharks that came to eat carrion. Looking at his subjects whose faces were filled with fear, Bahud Khan Katan slowly closed his eyes, with a trace of bitter tears in the corners of his eyes. He also knew that this so-called friendly alliance agreement was simply a decree to turn the Principality of Char into a vassal state of the elves, and it could even be said to be a decision that went against his ancestors. But if he didn't do this, what awaited his people would be a massacre. Unlike the wealthy fierce lion territory, most of the territory of the Principality of Char was desert, so even the nobles lived in the country in a nomadic manner. Moreover, due to the low level of industry, most of the warriors' armor was ordinary chainmail and scimitars, and most of the castles were just ordinary stone forts. Although such a military organization could cause heavy damage to the enemy entering the desert through harassment tactics, it had no power to resist when facing the elf troops mainly composed of ash dragon riders. Lord of the Horses Great Water, why don't you come out to save your people? Some devout nomadic warriors were unwilling to accept the cruel reality. Looking at the piles of human heads on the city wall, they couldn't help but pray to their main god. Seeing this scene, Bahud Khan Katan could no longer hold back the tears in his eyes. He murmured, ignoring the horrified eyes of the Scorpio assassin who was loyal to the Khan, "Water is dead. Char has long lost its future. We cannot waste the opportunity for peace that the horse god has fought for us." The Char Principality had no idea that their main god had been defeated by the Lady of Mist as early as when Rohan launched an attack on the Char Principality. A few days ago, Sinjil in the endless desert, the holy light shone on the earth, and bright petals and vines grew from the ground like a miracle. The nomads passing by exclaimed in joy, thinking that this was a blessing from their gods, but they didn't know that this was actually a gift from their main god before his death. In the center of the desert, a pure black stallion was lying in the dirty sand, with huge and horrifying wounds all over his body. It was obvious that he would not live long. The divine blood gleaming with golden light flowed on the dry desert, and green plants gradually grew out of the lifeless desert, and a new oasis was forming. "Why? I can feel the holiness and kindness in you. Why are you so cruel?" The black stallion used up his last strength to open his eyes, and looked at the white-veiled female elf not far away with puzzlement and sadness in his eyes, not understanding why the other party wanted to kill him. Just now, he heard his believers in Sinjil calling for help, so he hurried out of his temple, ready to save his believers. Unexpectedly, halfway, a sharp silver spear suddenly shot at him, and he fell to the ground with serious injuries. When he came to his senses, he saw that the elf goddess floating in the air was condensing a second spear, and the sharp spearhead was pointing at his head. The person who came was the real body of Lady of the Mist, Rajlia. Looking at the black stallion lying on the ground, Rajlia slowly put down the divine spear in her hand, and a trace of reluctance appeared in her pair of bright eyes. "I'm sorry, but I have reasons to do this, and I'm also doing this for my people. Spare Desha. Spare these innocent people." Looking at the silver dragons hovering and swooping over Sinjil in the distance, the black stallion stared at Rajlia, hoping to get a reply. He didn't care about his own life or death, but he didn't want to see his believers who had always served him suffer such hardships. "I promise you, I will make my believers stop, but you must also make your believers give up resistance." Faced with the desperate pleading of this dying god, Rajlia hesitated for a moment, and finally agreed to the other party's conditions. She also felt that her behavior was a bit of a stab in the back, and could even be said to be on par with the evil god, but in order to fight against the darker evil, she could only use this method. After feeling the sincerity in Rajlia's eyes and the pure divine power, Wata closed his eyes with relief and slowly breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you." At the same time, Bahud Khan Katan, who was passing through the mountain trail near Singata, the city of Salian, suddenly looked up to the south, which was the direction of Wata. "I'm Wata, the god of horses, the Khan of the Principality of Char, my most pious child. I have sacrificed my all to protect the future of Char, and now it's up to you." Looking at the national treasure of the Principality of Char, the ancestral warbow, which was slowly losing its luster in his hand, Bahud Khan Katan felt like he was struck by lightning, and slowly fell off his horse amid the exclamations of his servants. Chapter 215, Rebellion. The decision of the Principality of Char to give up resistance shocked the entire continent of Penda. No one expected that this tough and powerful desert country would give up resistance on its own initiative. Of course, compared to these mortals who were obsessed with territorial disputes, the gods representing their respective countries' beliefs were more shocked. Warta's power disappeared. How could this happen? Is he dead? Is he going to leave us forever like Dania? He is so kind. I have said it before, those evil foreign elves and their hypocritical goddesses are as evil as heretics. They should be exiled as soon as possible. On a lawn covered with flowers and green leaves, several native gods of the continent of Penda were discussing the two friends they had just lost. Of course, it was a discussion between gods, but the scene looked like an empathy. I don't know if it was because the climate of Penda was too pleasant, or because these goddesses of Penda were willing to show off their proud assets. These goddesses only used garlands as decoration. As for the only male god present, the archer god, Ulvet, from the stern Raven realm, he stole a few glances while drinking. A goddess holding a codex, wearing a white robe, and an owl on her shoulder noticed Ulvet's impropriety, and couldn't help but scold him. Slutty ranger, we didn't invite you to this meeting, so that you can look at other goddesses. As the only male god, don't you think you should take some responsibility? Come on, you know me. I just fought with the snow leopard in Misty Mountain some time ago. Didn't I just kill some of his bandit followers? He actually fought with me at the cost of his arm. When Ulvet heard that he was going to be the main force against the elves, his face was full of resistance. The claw wound on his chest had not healed yet, and he didn't want to participate in the battle now. Do you want us girls to go to war? Those elves are coming with such force that they will even devour the flesh and faith of the gods, just like locusts. The god of precognition, you know me, obviously has no good feelings towards these elves. To her, both the Durachi and the older elves are outsiders. Especially after losing two gods in succession, she is even more hostile to the murderer, the Lady of the Mist, whom she has never met. Looking at the red bow shining with a dim light on Ulvet's back, you know Mia's eyes turned, and then she said seriously, this battle is not a small fight with heretics at ordinary times. Ulvet, we need your strength. Even if you are unwilling to come, please at least lend us your bow. Are you serious? Ulvet was a little surprised. His bow has always been lent to those who are destined to fight, to eliminate the bandits who crossed the border from the Misty Mountain. Even the legendary mercenary Mordred, who had defeated the Bloodthirster and several armies of Misty Mountain, had used his bow, but he had never lent it to other gods. Because he had already poured most of his divine power into this artifact, that he had nurtured for nearly 10,000 years, the proof of Ulvet. He could say without exaggeration that anyone who could pick up his bow could fire arrows several times their own strength. It could be said that the stronger the user's strength and divine power, the greater the power of the proof of Ulvet. If this bow unfortunately fell into the hands of the heretic giant demon, then this weapon could even kill gods. It was okay to lend it to mortals at ordinary times. At least he could still make peace if something went wrong. But this time was different. If this war against the elves failed, and the proof of Ulvet unfortunately fell into the hands of the elves, that would be the end. This was a precious bow that he had nurtured for tens of thousands of years. If it really became someone else's weapon, because of lending it out, it would be no less than NTR for him. Eunomia obviously knew Ulvet's concerns. As the god of foresight, she thought of a seemingly reliable and foolproof plan and introduced, we can't let the elves' power continue to expand. We didn't regard the elves as a threat before, which was a mistake. Now is the time for the gods of Penda to regroup and fight against the powerful enemy together. We will select an excellent Penda warrior to become our common god and give all our power to this warrior and let him defeat the elves. After listening to Eunomia's plan, the goddesses present nodded in agreement, obviously agreeing with this plan. As the saying goes, a bundle of chopsticks cannot be broken. As long as the goddesses are willing to work together, the divine power that bursts out is enough to drive all the demons out of the mortal world. And now, they are going to point this spearhead at the elves. Ulvet did not rush to agree with this proposal, but asked curiously, so, who are you going to find? Since the elf goddess is so despicable, we naturally don't need to talk about reason. Let's choose from the people around the elf commander. World of Giants, Arsenal RQIU. the leader of the Silver Dragon Knights, Aaron, couldn't help but sneeze. Feeling the smell of ash still in the air, he couldn't help but complain, "Really, I'm already the Grand Master of the Knights, and since I have to be assigned to do this kind of aftermath, shouldn't this be handed over to the logistics department?" Since he was transferred to World of Giants by Rohan, he was assigned an important task by Rohan, which is to repair the ecological environment of World of Giants. Compared with many places on this planet that have not been completely occupied, there are too many millions of ash dragons, and some of them must be eliminated. That's great. I also want to join my colleagues in the war to unify Pender. Although Rohan repeatedly expressed the importance of this job to Aaron, Aaron still felt a little bored and dissatisfied. Although he never tires of playing with the women and technology of these new worlds, he still longs to be able to fly on the battlefield of the battle and fight those powerful enemies to the death. Sitting on the dragon saddle, Aaron looked at the lush vegetation below and some wild buffaloes running around and played target shooting with a musket out of boredom. Suddenly, he seemed to remember something, sat up straight on the dragon's back, and lowered his head to think. It seems that Dario wants to establish a new organization without the knowledge of Lord Rohan. What is it called? Inquisition? Maybe I can take advantage of this opportunity. As the second in command of the human faction, Aaron has long disliked Dario. The elves take all the benefits, and the Pender people do all the hard work. Is this good? This is not good. If the plan goes smoothly, then he can not only suppress these arrogant elves, but also strengthen the importance of humans in the eyes of Lord Rohan. Should I also set up an organization to fight him? Chapter 216 The Tribunal is established. Fortunately and unfortunately, the remaining human forces in the dragon world were not enough to pose a sufficient threat to Aaron and his knights, so the recovery work went smoothly. After all, the Ash Dragon alone was enough to almost destroy these humans who lacked heavy firepower, not to mention the repeated attacks of the elves and silver dragons. Although there were occasionally some remnants of the defeated army using rocket launchers, they could not cause much damage except for injuring a few unprotected Ash Dragons. In addition to providing these weapons to the arsenal for a search, humans who learned to use tools from childhood were also excellent labor. Apart from being able to skillfully use wrenches and hammers and understand work manuals, they were already much better than the refugee slaves purchased from the Pender world. Sinjal, the continent of Pender is the largest slave city in Pender. Sinjal was once a paradise for the Red Brotherhood and slave traders. The chiefs from various tribes in the Principality of Char were very happy to exchange furs and minerals for delicate new girls, to find themselves a few more wives. The reconstruction of this city naturally fell on the shoulders of Dario, the governor of the Pender world. A black tower symbolizing the Durachi elves has been built, and the towering spire pierces the sky like a sharp blade. In the black tower, several elves and humans are conspiring. Dario, are you sure you want to set up a new organization behind Lord Rohan's back? Lord Rohan may not like this behavior. Mars, the captain of the Silver Mist Guard, looked at Dario sitting in the main seat with a serious face, and warned him solemnly. As an elf warrior born in the Nagarand orphanage, Mars had known Rohan in the tavern, before he became the Lord of Dread. When Rohan first came to the orphanage to recruit soldiers, he did not hesitate to abandon his job as an elf blacksmith, and chose to become a Dread spearman under Rohan without hesitation. Although at the beginning, he followed Rohan simply for money and glory, but after experiencing the adventure in the other world, his loyalty to Lord Rohan rose. Especially after becoming the first batch of Silver Mist Guards, Mars has been fighting at the forefront of the war, and finally fought for himself to become the captain. Dario was naturally well aware of this resume, so he looked at the sturdy warrior with satisfaction and explained, as you all know, Lord Rohan has recently recruited a large number of elf recruits, among which there are naturally mixed people and those who are trying to take advantage of the situation. This is inevitable. As Lord Rohan's prestige rises, more and more Durachi will inevitably join our ranks. There is no need to be so serious, right? Regarding Dario's concerns, a young captain who is hundreds of years old couldn't help but ask. He is young, and has not experienced too many political struggles, so he doesn't know much about these things. No. Don't forget that we are all believers of the Lady of the Mist. It is our mission to expel chaos, and those sorceresses are apprentices of Morathi. We have to be on guard. But Dario is different. He had served as a soldier under the command of the Witch King many years ago, so he also has some understanding of Morathi. The authority of this supreme sorceress is so great that almost all sorceresses have had contact with her. How can he be assured? Everyone in Nagaroth knows about Morathi and her pleasure cult, as well as those indulgent believers who have footprints in almost all cities. Although she has always claimed that she believes in the goddess of indulgence of the elves, more and more evidence shows that she is very likely related to Slaanesh, one of the 4 chaos gods. Looking at the loyal generals around him whose expressions were becoming increasingly serious, Dario picked up the sword that Rohan had given him that year and said seriously, "We must remain highly vigilant against those sorceresses who have just joined your army. Although their current job is just to make some magic rune shells, they may also bring chaos corrosion to other worlds." Lord Rohan once said that our world full of despair and chaos will eventually be destroyed, but everything is not irreparable. Now your eyes are all on the fight against chaos. Someone must monitor those possible demons and monsters in places that he cannot detect. I agree. Lord Rohan cannot personally review the loyalty of new recruits and generals every time. He really needs a new organization to supervise the captains and ourselves. That's right. The erosion of chaos is unpredictable. We can remain loyal to you now, but who can guarantee the future? The generals present unanimously agreed to this suggestion. After Rohan's propaganda day and night, they had already taken it as their responsibility to resist chaos. Even some humans who had never left Penda, the Mistwalkers, agreed with Dario's proposal. Although they were humans, they had gained the favor of the Lady of the Mist through their piety and desperate battles with the snake cult, becoming Mistwalkers who could use weak magic. Correspondingly, they also inherited the obligation to fight against chaos. So as the most trusted humans of the Lady of the Mist and Rohan, they were also qualified to participate in this meeting. Give the order, Dario. Since you proposed how to form this organization, you should have thought about how to monitor the army, right? Looking at the generals around him with expectant eyes, Dario lowered his head and pondered for a moment, then raised his head and introduced solemnly, "As Lord Rohan's army grows in size and conquers more worlds, the number of groups that our organization needs to monitor will inevitably increase day by day. In order to be able to manage and monitor more effectively, I decided to refer to the method of the Red Brotherhood and divide this organization into 3 parts. Military Tribunal, responsible for monitoring the purity of soldiers and mages in the army and eliminating those chaos believers and pagans that may exist. Chaos Tribunal, warriors who are responsible for assassinating and searching for chaos believers. Due to the extremely dangerous nature of the mission, they need to be composed of warriors who have been blessed by the Lady of the Mist. Alien Tribunal, responsible for searching for intelligence from various other worlds. Any existence that may pose a threat to Lord Rohan and the Lady of the Mist must be reported and eradicated if necessary. This is my plan. Do you have anything else to add? After hearing Dario's plan, all the generals and Mistwalkers fell into shock and silence. They thought Dario just wanted to form a small group, but now it seems that the scale of this organization will become larger and larger, and even become an indispensable part of the army. Then I declare that the Tribunal is officially established today. Let us work together to eliminate the corruption of chaos and contribute our strength to Lord Rohan's great expedition. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 Assassination. Rohan, who was deploying troops in Boshi City at this time, didn't know that Dario had given him a big job. But even if he knew, he wouldn't care, or rather, Rohan hoped that Dario could handle these things for him. A few weeks later, at the shooting range in Boshi City, Hushbang, a Deshagazi raider wearing brown and yellow chainmail and a scimitar on his waist, was riding a horse and galloping in the shooting range while using the horn bow in his hand to aim at the wooden target dozens of meters away and shooting continuously. The sharp arrows easily penetrated the wooden target, and each time they were able to accurately hit the center of the crotches, which made the onlookers very satisfied. As the arrows in the quiver were exhausted, the rider came to Rohan amid the applause of the crowd, dismounted and saluted, and then left the shooting range. Looking at the back of the masked rider, Rohan turned his gaze to the ash dragon flying in the sky, and said with emotion, "These Char archers are good. They are much stronger than the old peasant archers of Batobia in terms of power and speed. If there were no dragon riders, I would definitely bring some. After all, compared to the ash dragon riders who can spit dragon flames, ordinary archers are completely useless under Rohan's command. In terms of disrupting the enemy's formation, what infantry can maintain its principles under the attack of dragon flames? In terms of dividing infantry, even the tough skin of ogres is difficult to remain intact under the claws of dragons, let alone chaos warriors wearing iron armor. What's more, recruiting these Char archers means that additional fodder and military pay need to be provided, which is too outrageous. The Ash Dragon Riders are all members of the Teutonic Knights recognized by the Ash Dragons. They are all from noble families, and are not short of money, so they have never taken the initiative to ask Rohan for military pay. There were even some nobles who, after learning that they would have the opportunity to ride a flying dragon after joining the Teutonic Knights, even offered money to Rohan just to be able to join the Knights. And the Ash Dragon was not a picky eater, it would eat anything, as long as it was ash, and there was no need to worry about logistics. With such cheap dragon riders, why would he spend real money to recruit Char archers? I gave them a job, and they dared to ask me for a salary? Exclamation mark. Let's go, there's nothing to see anymore, and it's time to prepare for the second battle and contact the older elves. After bidding farewell to the staff in the shooting range, Rohan left the shooting range with several guards, humming a little tune, and walked towards the Black Tower. Along the way, Rohan could see the newly renovated Mist Temple and the open-air podium, where some Teutonic monks were giving propaganda speeches to answer questions for the local people. The former Radiant Cross Knights were also incorporated into Rohan, and most of the knights joined the Teutonic Knights to serve Rohan after understanding the teachings of the Lady of the Mist. Of course, there were some knights who were unwilling to surrender. Rohan did not persecute them, but simply expelled them from the ranks of the knights. These knights took off their heavy plate armor and war horses, and wandered around the countryside with only a few medical books and swords, providing help to the helpless as much as they could. That's great. If only the Warhammer world could be as prosperous and harmonious as this, I wouldn't have to work so hard. Looking at the city of Boshi, which had completely recovered from the bombing, Rohan had a kind smile on his face. Having stayed in the society of Durachi for so long, Rohan had almost forgotten what it felt like to be a normal person. Thinking of this, Rohan couldn't help but pick up a skewer from the barbecue stall on the street, and then said to the soldiers who were paying the bill, "Maybe after the situation with chaos is relatively stable, I can consider finding a stable world to relax and have fun for a few years. Traveling in the mountains, playing in the water, exploring unknown treasures, saving the princess imprisoned by the dragon, just like Inarian did back then." You think too much, sir. Although I also firmly believe that the threat of chaos will subside one day, I think it will take at least a few hundred years. The guards couldn't help rolling their eyes at their lord's somewhat naive idea, and then joined in the complaints. Holiday? What holiday? Only those who have made no contribution to resisting chaos have the time to take a holiday. After eating all the skewers in his hand, Rohan took the handkerchief handed by his personal guards, and wiped his greasy mouth, sighing helplessly. Yeah, that's true. It seems I have to be busy for a few more years. Be careful. Suddenly, Rohan's heart was alarmed, and then he noticed a dazzling red light coming from the corner, and hurriedly summoned the Claw of Holy Glory, and the magic shield to resist. The claws forged by the god of craftsmen, Val, with star fragments are not only the sharpest weapons, but also the best defensive gear. The ice blue magic shield barely resisted this for a few tenths of a second, and then turned into light spots all over the sky. However, it was these few short millimeters that were enough for Rohan to protect his vitals with his left hand wearing the golden claws. Ding. A crisp sound came from in front of Rohan's neck, and the huge force on his palm made his left arm numb, and his body flew out uncontrollably. My lord. The guards also reacted quickly, pulling out the crossbows from their waists, and aiming at the direction of the flash, and pulling the trigger. According to Rohan's request, if he was assassinated, the guards would not use their bodies to cover him as before, but would capture or kill the assassin as soon as possible. But it was obvious that the assassin was quite confident in the fatal blow he had delivered, and even if the guards reacted quickly, they would still get nothing. Ahem, this is really a fatal blow. Rohan struggled to get up from the overturned fruit stall, looking at the arrow that pierced through the silver mail of Isolama and went straight into his heart, and a huge rage surged in his heart. The last time he was ambushed so badly, it seemed to be because of the great horned rat, right? Puff. Looking at the barbs covered with spikes on the arrow and the small pieces of his own flesh and blood stuck on it, Rohan's eyes narrowed slightly. The nearly 70 points of ranged resistance and special protection allowed him to react quickly, but even so he was slightly injured. If it was his men, or even Isabel, they would have been killed by this arrow on the spot. Thinking that the other party might target the people around him, Rohan took a rebirth pill, then summoned an older composite bow and shouted, "Chase. Such a dangerous guy, we must not let him escape. Let the flying dragons block the entire city, and dig 3 feet into the ground to find this person for me." Yes. After receiving the order, a personal soldier took out a portable firework from his arms and pulled the fuse towards the sky. Whoosh, the bright red fireworks exploded in the air, and the people of the whole city were attracted by this sudden firework, thinking it was a celebration held somewhere. However, under this firework, the faces of the Druki elves in the whole city changed drastically, and they all ran towards the direction of the military camp. That was the signal for martial law in the whole city. Chapter 218 Recovery. In just a few minutes, the 3 city gates around the city were all blocked, and the city walls were filled with Druchi warriors who took over the city defense. They didn't know about the assassination of Rohan, but they guessed that something big was going to happen. So it was better to control the city gates like this. At the lake dock, several captains of merchant ships were kneeling on the ground, helplessly watching the elf warriors searching their merchant ships. "You can't do this. I'm doing a legal business. Why do you forcibly plunder our merchant ships?" Some merchant ship captains were dissatisfied and tried to resist with passes and business licenses, but were slapped unconscious by the angry Druchi warriors. One of the merchants who made the most noise was killed by a sword. The leading captain shook off the blood on his sword and shouted angrily to the frightened captains, "I don't have time to mess with you. All ships in the port must be inspected now. Those who just left the port must all come back. Those who resist will be killed without mercy." They had received the news of Rohan's assassination, so they all held their breath and vowed to capture the assassin with the red longbow. Apart from anything else, if Lord Rohan really died, they would never be able to return to Nagaroth. On the lake in the distance, several ash dragon riders were circling in the air, driving the merchant captains back to Boshi City. As for those who disobeyed orders, the wooden boats in the distance that slowly sank to the bottom of the lake with dragon flames were a warning. In the castle of Boshi City, Isabel looked at the arrow wound on Rohan's chest with concern. She continued to inject vitality into Rohan's body and asked anxiously, "It shouldn't be like this. Normal poisons and curses shouldn't hurt you. What on earth is this?" "I don't know. Although the wound can't heal, I have sealed it with magic. It shouldn't bleed anymore." Feeling the pain in his chest, Rohan frowned slightly. This arrow was really amazing. It could cause a wound that even a living saint couldn't heal. Although it was not fatal, this wound was like a curse that constantly restrained the magic in his body, making him temporarily unable to cast large-scale magic. Eternal Sorrow Curse, the poison made by Eunomia, the god of prescience, and several goddesses, mixed with the terrifying snake venom of the female snake goddess Dahaka, can cause irreparable corrosion to the flesh. HMPH, you can't beat me on the front battlefield, so you start using such despicable means. Looking at the introduction of his injuries on the system panel, Rohan's face showed a trace of hatred. He had never used assassination methods, and he didn't expect the other party to do this to him. Although he did have bad intentions towards them, they actually joined forces to take the initiative to attack, which Rohan had never expected. It seems that the plan to defeat them one by one has been exposed. It's time to complete the trial arranged by Lady Mist. Thinking of this, Rohan gently pushed Isabel in front of him away, and then secretly called Lady Mist's name in his heart. As early as a year ago, Lady Mist asked him if he wanted to participate in the trial of Mist God's Choice, but Rohan temporarily refused. According to Rohan's original plan, he should first complete the mission of unifying the artifact of Penda and obtain the goddess's cry before going through this trial, which is relatively conservative. But now the situation is a little different. Since the other party has shamelessly joined forces to deal with him, he naturally has to teach the other party a lesson. After receiving Rohan's call, Rajlia's consciousness immediately descended to Rohan's side. Just as she was about to say hello, she noticed the bloody hole on Rohan's chest. Who did this? Is it that female snake god? Feeling the decayed breath coming from the wound and the curse that was constantly consuming Rohan's magic power, Rajlia's eyes flashed with anger. She was originally digesting the power of faith of Wata, the god of horses, so she did not let Rohan continue to expand during this period. Unexpectedly, someone actually took action. As a goddess who protects her shortcomings like Rohan, Rajlia has never treated her believers badly, and she can't bear to see her believers suffer. Although her focus has been on Rohan during this period, it does not mean that she will ignore the requests of other believers. Iltharion Virus wants to solve the frequent chaos rifts in the territory, and Rajlia will let her power cover the entire Iris to facilitate the early warning. The pirates in Grand Town hope to return safely every time they go out to sea, and Rajlia will use her power to guide them back to safe waters, even the human believers in the continent of Penda, as long as they show enough bravery and piety, will have the opportunity to receive her blessing. It can be said that, although she has now gained a lot of faith power through Rohan's conquest of the other world, she will always give these powers back to Rohan and her devout believers without hesitation. In this case, someone dared to touch her treasure, which was simply tired of living. A bright holy light shone through the visiting goddess statue in the room, shining on Rohan's skin that was slightly white due to the injury on his chest, and immediately made Rohan couldn't help but groan. The poisonous blood blocked by magic in the body was successfully purified, and the blood began to circulate again along with the pink flesh that grew. Even his pale skin regained its former rosiness, and the magic power that had been consumed by suppressing the wounds in his body was also replenished. Feeling that the wounds in his body had been repaired, Rohan stood up from the bed in a good mood and thanked the Lady of the Mist. It was a despicable assassin, my dear lady. The arrows he used were coated with the poison of the female snake god. Fortunately, they did not hit the vital points, otherwise I'm afraid I would never see you again. What a blasphemy. He actually tried to gain an advantage through such a despicable means as assassination. This is no longer an ordinary cultist. We must strike hard. The thick fog instantly covered the entire Boshi city, and almost all the species in the city felt that their bodies were under surveillance in an instant. Rajlia personally examined all the elves and humans in the city, found the assassin, and settled the score later. This was her purpose. She was still a little guilty about the matter of Wata, but now her anger has been completely ignited, and she can't wait to kill those native gods of Pand. However, the gods of Penda seemed to have planned this in advance. Rajlia searched the entire city, but could not find any trace of the assassin. TSK, you are so fast. Madam, in order to better spread your faith in the continent of Penda, I have decided to participate in your God's Trial now. Chapter 219, God's Chosen Trial. Really? Are you sure you don't want to prepare more? My trial requires you to fight the demons directly. Hearing that Rohan was finally willing to become her first Mist Chosen, Rajlia was delighted, but she still asked seriously. Since her former believers were taken away by Lilith in a despicable way, she was particularly concerned about this trial of Rohan. Not only did she have to choose a battlefield that could fully exert Rohan's combat power, but she also needed to be well known enough to announce to the world the power of Mist Chosen. For this day, she was very painstaking, even at the cost of having a small-scale conflict with some human gods. Faced with the question of Lady Mist, Rohan naturally could not be stage frightened, but nodded firmly and said, "For this day, I have been preparing for a long time. You just need to tell me what to do, honorable lady." As long as he can obtain the identity of Chosen and can cast magic freely, he can completely get rid of the identity of low-level cannon fodder. becoming the chosen of the mist, although it means that he has to take on more responsibilities and obligations. It also gives him a hopeful future. At that time, even if he cannot resist chaos and the Warhammer world is really irreversibly heading towards its end, he can also escape from this world with his remnants. Looking at Rohan with a resolute gaze, Rajlia nodded with satisfaction, and then issued her first order. Go and gather your army, my most devout believer, and you will gain supreme glory, after leading your powerful army, to defeat the enemy I designate. My sharp blade will swing for you, my lady. Well, in the meantime, I will leave my clone to be responsible for the security of your territory, and you, my powerful warrior, your duty is Warhammer world. Kiev the cold and frozen Kiev has never been a habitable place. Compared with it being too close to the Chaos Wasteland, it often faces the plunder of the Norskins. Although with the help of Bear God Urson, this land will be rejuvenated for a period of time every year, but this cannot prevent the increasingly frequent Norscan invasions. Prague, a large city located in the north of Kiev, is also a pathetic city called the Cursed City by the locals. Because it is close to the Chaos Wasteland, and is also an outpost facing the Chaos invasion, every raiding Norse war state will inevitably clash with this city. Because there are so many times, even the locals don't know how many times the city has been massacred and how many dead souls are hovering over the city. Haha, it's almost there. On the snowy wasteland, a boy in a fur coat was running on the grassland in fear, panting while running, cheering himself up. It is not difficult to see from his blood-red pupils and the leather coat soaked with sweat that this poor child has not stopped for a long time. Dada dada. Suddenly, a series of rapid horse hoof sounds came from the bushes behind him, and the boy's eyes, which originally had a hint of expectation, instantly revealed despair. He knew that those terrible Norse predators must have followed his escape footprints and caught up with him. A woo was expected, accompanied by several wolf howls full of murderous intent. Several grey figures suddenly rushed over from behind him and surrounded him. It was the terrible Chaos War Mastiffs. Looking at these wolfhounds covered with terrifying spikes and sharp sawtooth, a fierce look flashed in the boy's eyes. He stopped running and pulled out the small hatchet at his waist. Although he was still young and knew that his resistance was futile, he decided to die gloriously like a true Kislevite. Woo woo woo. However, whether they were waiting for their master to arrive or wanted to play with the prey in front of them before enjoying the blood feast, these war mastiffs did not rush to attack. There was a cruel look in their eyes, and green poisonous saliva with deadly germs kept flowing from the corners of their mouths, while they kept rubbing the ground with their claws. Bear Father Urson, please bring down divine punishment. Save me, save Kiev. Looking at these terrible monsters, the courage that the boy had finally mustered in his heart was gradually worn out, and the hand holding the hatchet could not stop shaking. He was a villager from the outskirts of Erengrad. His father was a retired Kosa hunter, his mother was a tailor, and he had a cute little bear as a pet. He originally had a warm family. However, the invasion of the Norsemen destroyed everything. Those hateful barbarians burned down their village. His father was brutally killed to cover him and his mother chose to stay to cover him. In grief, he finally escaped into Erengrad with the remaining little bear, but the whole city was besieged by the Norsemen. After several weeks of hard fighting, he finally found an opportunity to escape the city with several refugees and prepared to go to Praja in the east for refuge. However, it was raining cats and dogs. Not long after they left, Erengrad was captured by the Norsemen and the whole city was looted. The two-headed frost dragon spewed out the breath of death wantonly, turning those brave and warlike Cossack warriors into ice sculptures, and the trolls gnawed the flesh and blood of innocent people and smashed the terrified citizens into pulp. Even the most brave and warlike shooting soldiers chose to use giant axes to fight, because they ran out of ammunition and food, and finally all died under the sharp blades of chaos warriors. He did not forget that in the chaotic battlefield, there were hundreds of demons holding giant swords emitting red light and constantly roaring. This is not an Oscan invasion at all, but the chaos demons are coming back. His refugee companions had long been hunted down and killed by the Norskins, and his little bear was bitten to death by the war mastiff to cover him. He had lost everything. Don't panic, Pushkin. Remember your father's teachings and chop the enemy with a sharp side. Looking at the burly figures riding on the backs of war horses and wearing horn helmets in the distance, Pushkin silently recited his name while raising the short axe in his hand. Maybe it was because of the blessing of God Urson. He felt that his body was filled with endless strength, as if he could chop the fur of these war mastiffs with an axe. Come on, you Norse bastards, tear me to pieces if you can. My motherland will avenge me. Seeing the anger on the face of the young man in front of him, and the hysterical roar, the Norse raiders in the distance actually stopped their horses and ran back in fear. Even the war mastiffs seemed to be frightened by this bastard spirit, and they all retreated with their tails between their legs, and finally fled back with their masters. Looking at these fleeing Norsemen, Pushkin, who was holding up his short axe, suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, and then collapsed to the ground with powerlessness. Ha. I thought I was really going to die. Although he didn't know why these Norsemen retreated in fear, he knew that it was definitely not his own credit. After panting for a while, Pushkin suddenly fainted on the ground and murmured with his last strength, "There is someone behind me, right? Ha, what a smart little guy. Don't worry, you won't die, even if the bloodthirsty demon comes today." Before falling into the endless darkness, Pushkin only heard a loud laugh that made him feel peaceful, which made the corners of his mouth unconsciously reveal a smile. Finally safe. Chapter 220. The Dwarf Hiking. It's the Norse raiders. Run. I'll hold him back. Pushkin, go out the back door. Mom will stay here to buy time. Go. Roar. After an unknown amount of time, Pushkin woke up from his nightmare in a cold sweat and suddenly remembered his situation. So he got up and checked the situation. Through the cold night light and the bonfire around him, he found that he was actually in a cave, and around the bonfire, a group of short but tall figures were cooking soup. The long brown or grey beards were chasing their chests, and the armor with dim runes flashing looked particularly gorgeous under the moonlight. Isn't this the description of the dwarves living in the mountains in the legend? Exclamation mark. Seeing these dwarf warriors who were much shorter than himself, Pushkin was so scared that he quickly picked up the wooden stick beside him and asked in a frightened voice, "Great Urson, are you the legendary dwarves? Oh, little guy is awake. Do you want to try my cooking? Our broth is absolutely unique." A dwarf with a long beard and brown hair wearing gorgeous iron armor heard Pushkin's voice and didn't care about the other party's stick at his head. He smiled and brought a bowl of broth. Seeing that the dwarf didn't seem to be hostile to him, and that the other party had saved him before, Pushkin slowly let down his guard and took the wooden bowl from the other party. The fragrant aroma entered his nose, making him forget to drink the soup for a moment, and instead stood there blankly with the bowl. The bearded dwarf was obviously used to this situation. He sighed, stepped forward and patted Pushkin on the shoulder, waist, and then comforted him. "Drink, poor child. At least something in your stomach can warm your body, and there will be plenty of opportunities for revenge in the future." Hearing the long-bearded dwarf's comforting voice, Pushkin once again recalled his experience in the past week. The tragic death of his parents and the screams of the little bear before his death finally overwhelmed the boy who was only a teenager. He couldn't help but sit on the ground, sobbing softly while drinking soup. The surrounding dwarves heard the boys crying and cast pitiful and comforting eyes. Since entering Kyiv, they have witnessed countless cruel human purgatory in villages that have been massacred. The bearded dwarf sighed again, then turned and entered a tent and said solemnly to the majestic short figure inside, "Great hiking. It seems that the content of Tsarkiel's letter for help is completely true. Humans cannot resist this evil chaos invasion alone." Before the dwarf called the hiking could reply, a dwarf warrior with a slightly short beard also entered the tent and cursed in an almost angry tone, "Uncle Ericsson, those kings have no intention of coming to support at all, and even the number of weapons and supplies they sent is far from enough. They are simply a group of short-sighted people." "Yes, father, those kings actually dared to disobey the orders of the High King. They are simply traitors of the dwarves. This crime should be recorded in the Book of Hate." Along with the angry shouting of the young dwarf, the other dwarves in the tent also complained, obviously extremely dissatisfied with the dwarf kings who were hypocritical. "Respect your ancestors, obey the king, carry your weapons with pride, don't fear your enemies, hate greenskins, and be suspicious of elves, and you will be safe. This is a dwarf proverb from the War of Vengeance, War of the Longbird, and the content emphasized is almost all the dwarf's way of doing things. However, now these kings dare to disobey the orders of the High King, and even dare to break their oaths after receiving clear orders. This is simply a blasphemy against the ancestors. Let's talk about the affairs of the kingdoms after I come back. The most important thing now is to solve the dilemma of Kjolv. Looking at his angry son and nephew, Dwarf High King, Ericsson's face also showed anger and helplessness. Before the real battle officially started, these kings began to despise his central authority and showed considerable stinginess, which was really hateful. These kings just want to hide in their castles, hoping that chaos will subside one day and they can survive the disaster. But I don't know where there is such a good thing in the world. In Ericsson's view, if you want to survive in this world that is gradually heading towards destruction, you can only survive in this cruel world by uniting all forces. When he just inherited the throne of the Supreme King, a young elf named Finneber came to the Eternal Peak. Not only did he become the first elf to come to the Eternal Peak since the War of Vengeance, he later became the Phoenix King, Big Boo, and worked hard to repair the relationship between the elves and the dwarves. Now, Finneber even allows dwarves and humans to live together in the elven city, Lothern, which has never happened before. And now, even the elves and dwarves can reach a temporary consensus. Why can't these dwarf kings unite for the common survival problem? Thinking of this, Ericsson couldn't help but sigh again, then looked at the map in front of him and introduced. According to the news given to us by the Kislevites, their army has completed its assembly in Prague and will join us in a decisive battle with chaos on the giant bridge outside the city. Great, I can finally kill those damn demons. Don't be careless. According to the intelligence sent back by the rangers and helicopters, there are thousands of demon armies and tens of thousands of Norskins. The Chaos Army is composed of thousands of demons. This force should not be underestimated. Ericsson's face was full of sorrow. If he could gather the power of several kingdoms, then he could at least gather thousands of dwarf warriors, enough to face these chaos demons. But now, without volunteers from other kingdoms, Ericsson can only lead hundreds of dwarf warriors from the Eternal Peak to support Kjolv, which is bound to suffer heavy casualties. After thinking for a long time, Ericsson finally raised his head firmly and said seriously to his descendants around him, the coming battle is destined to be very difficult, but we must not let Kjolv be isolated and helpless. The human Tsar trusts us, and we must respond. Let the soldiers bring up all their belongings, rifled muskets, troll hammers, organ cannons, show those damn demons some color. In the name of Grimnir, fight to the death. The descendants of the High King roared and left the tent. One of the young dwarves who followed the shouting was also about to leave, but was suddenly stopped by Ericsson. Looking at the sturdy dwarf in front of him, the High King's face was full of smiles, and he said in the gentlest voice possible, I promised your father that I would take good care of you. I won't say any nonsense like, don't go to the battlefield, but I also hope that you will protect yourself while fighting bravely on the battlefield. Don't worry, uncle, I will teach those demons a profound lesson. The young dwarf patted the rune battle axe on his waist with a firm look, which made Ericsson feel as if he saw his deceased good brother. For this nephew whom he regarded as his own son, Ericsson patted the other's shoulder with satisfaction and said with emotion, well, I believe you will not let me down. Thorgrim. Chapter 221 I'm so unlucky. After a few days of getting along, Pushkin finally got familiar with these dwarves and became the tallest member of the dwarf reinforcement. Although the expedition team was exposed to the surveillance of the Noskans, in order to save him, the dwarves did not blame him for it. Finally, after several night attacks by the Norskan elves, the whole team finally arrived at the northern city of Kjolv, Prague, without any danger. This cursed city has not been harassed by the chaos demons at this time, but the city is already full of mobilized citizens and troops. After bidding farewell to the dwarf team, Pushkin took the small purse given by the long-bearded dwarf and looked at this strange city with a blank face. He could see panic and fear on the faces of every citizen passing by, and determination and anger in the eyes of those Cossack warriors. There is no doubt that, although the city is also in chaos, because of the impending chaos, there are still a large number of loyal warriors standing firmly on the front line. My brothers and sisters, The motherland is calling your names. Join the great patriotic war. On every street, you can see the Orthodox priests in red robes shouting at the top of their lungs, preaching patriotic ideas to the young people in the crowd. Many passionate young people are following these priests. They are about to be sent to the barracks for simple training, and then go to the battlefield as mobilized soldiers. Joining the army. It seems not bad. Looking at those boys who are as young as himself, and go to the battlefield without hesitation. Pushkin's eyes also reveal hatred for chaos. He has long put life and death aside. Now he just wants to kill 3 Norsemen on the battlefield with his own hands, to avenge his parents and the little bear. The priest seemed to have noticed Pushkin standing on the street. He thought that this seemingly young child was separated from his family, so he stepped forward and asked, "Child, do you need help? Do you need me to arrange for someone to take you to find your parents?" "No, respected priest, I hope you can arrange for me to join the army. I also want to fight the Norsemen on the battlefield." Pushkin's worried and firm voice spread throughout the alley. People looked at the young and thin figure in surprise, but they felt that the other party was so great. Seeing such a young child willing to serve the motherland, the priest excitedly held Pushkin's hand and shouted to the hesitant citizens around him, "Urson, look at this child. Even he knows to sacrifice his life for the country at this age. Don't you have less feelings for the motherland than this child?" "Bullshit. I'm absolutely loyal to the motherland, and I want to join the army. I will come too. Even such a child is willing to sacrifice his life for the country. How can I let the glory of others shine on me and remain indifferent?" These words instantly provoked the hearts of all the young and middle-aged people present. Everyone came to the priest with a cry, ready to fight to the death with those Norskans. As the focus of everyone's attention, Pushkin stood in the crowd in a daze, looking at the sea of people that submerged him, and was at a loss. He was not tall and physically strong, so he was no match for these Kossis strongmen. He was immediately squeezed to the back of the team by the crowd and finally disappeared in the crowd. It was not until the noisy crowd followed the priest and left that Pushkin, who was at the back, finally reacted and hurriedly chased after them, shouting, "Wait a minute, I haven't registered yet, I haven't registered yet." He really wanted to fight the Norsemen, so he didn't leave the noisy team, but squeezed in with all his strength. No one, including Pushkin himself, noticed that as he resolutely chased after the priest, a barely perceptible blue light flashed in his eyes. "Ostrosk Fortress, west of Bridges, squeak, squeak, run." No, no. These Norse monkeys are crazy. Damn monkeys. The Horned Rat and the corrupted clan will remember your actions. Yes, yes. Countless ratmen struggled to escape from the burning ruins, looking at the Khorne army behind them in horror, and hurriedly fled towards the deep pit of hell. These poor little rats belonged to a small clan under the corrupted clan. They were originally going to rebuild the ruins and make contributions to the clan diligently. However, this suddenly appeared Khorne army did not even give them a chance to communicate, and directly tore their compatriots into pieces. Raw. Behind these ratmen, more than a dozen 3-meter tall rat trolls were fighting desperately with the Chaos Warriors, constantly roaring and swinging the huge hammers and claws on their wrists at the surrounding Norskans. The crazy offensive once made the surrounding Norskans retreat again and again, and it seemed to have really delayed the Norskans' offensive. However, Chaos Warriors are not vegetarians, not to mention that they are Khorne believers. In a more bloody and crazy battle, these Khorne Chaos Warriors holding scarlet battle axes in both hands are leaving deep blood marks on the rat trolls. Even though the rat trolls rely on their physical strength strengthened by the warp stone to heal their wounds, the Khorne Warriors are chopping more vigorously. A creature that can constantly spray blood and cannot be killed must be able to please the blood god better, right? Hundreds of battle axes engraved with blasphemous runes chopped at the sutured muscles of the rat trolls, finally making them unable to bear the weight and falling in a pool of blood. A Khorne warrior directly chopped off the head of the rat troll with an axe, then picked up the ugly head and roared to the sky. Blood sacrifice to the blood god, skull to the skull seat. Rumble. As soon as the voice fell, the ground of the ruins suddenly began to shake violently, and then 3 sharp giant blades pierced out from the ground, splitting the Chaos Warrior into 4 pieces. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, and the blood of compatriots splashed on the surrounding Chaos Warriors. There was even a warrior with a piece of fresh blood sausage hanging on his rabbit ears. However, this bloody scene did not make them feel scared or bored. Instead, they looked at the huge figure that broke out of the ground with more enthusiasm. The huge body, which was 6 meters high, rose from the ground and was covered with twisted and swollen unknown muscles. Its fur was inlaid with dense dimensional stones, which made people feel disgusted at a glance. The most terrifying thing was that 2 pairs of terrifying claws several meters long were tied to the arms of this huge body. The 6 long blades covered with rust shone with bloody brilliance, which was frightening. This was a mutant rat troll from the corrupted clan. Compared with the inferior rat trolls of the Sawtail clan that Rohan had encountered before, this rat troll was not only larger in size, but also had a dimensional stone engine embedded in its back. The surrounding ground continued to emit dazzling green lightning, which showed the terrifying power of this ferocious beast. Roar. The mutant rat troll raised its hands and pounced on the Khorne Chaos Warriors in front of it. Its sharp claws immediately chopped several warriors who were unable to dodge into pieces. However, the Chaos Warriors waved their axes more excitedly and charged at the mutant rat trolls as if they were ready to drown the giant beast with human waves. Blood sacrifice to the blood god. Skull to the skull seat. As long as they could chop off the head of this giant beast and sacrifice it to the blood god, they would definitely receive blessings and divine grace, right? Chapter 222, Chaos Lord of Khorne. The sharp blades kept slashing at the surrounding Khorne Chaos Warriors, easily knocking these heavily armored warriors flying. However, these Chaos Warriors did not retreat at all. They had already sacrificed their souls to the Chaos Gods, and the full covering heavy armor on their bodies had already been deeply bound to their flesh. Blood sacrifice to the blood god, skull sacrifice to the skull seat. Or, with the roar of the Chaos Warriors, even the mutant rat trolls could not resist the increasing number of injuries on their bodies, so they also roared angrily to the sky. The dimensional stone engine embedded in the flesh behind it immediately made bursts of noise, and dimensional lightning filled with evil green light began to slowly gather, preparing to bombard the surrounding enemies. Although its brain transformed by dimensional stone could not make it have too high intelligence, it was still enough for it to start the engine behind it. Rumble. Dimensional lightning fell from the sky, instantly splitting the dozen Chaos Warriors surrounding it into ashes, and at the same time stagnating the offensive of the Khorne Warriors. Roar. Taking this opportunity, the mutant rat trolls also fiercely turned their claws to other retreating Khorne Warriors, immediately leaving huge cracks on their armor. Even the Norscan raiders who were trying to attack with javelins in the distance were frightened by the giant beast and retreated again and again, and had to choose to scatter in all directions. What? You said that this is unworthy of the blood god. This is just a tactical shift, not running away. For a moment, the mutant rat trolls seemed to suppress the Khorne Warriors. A bunch of trash. A bigger rat beat you back again and again. Are you worthy of the blood god's gift to you? A roar comparable to the roar of the rat trolls came from behind them, and the Khorne Warriors who had retreated a little looked behind them, with a trace of panic and bloodthirsty impulse in their eyes. Boom boom boom, heavy footsteps came from behind. Even the crazy mutant rat troll showed a trace of surprise in his eyes. He looked at the figure in the distance in surprise. The nearly 3-meter tall body was covered with heavy scarlet plate armor, and 2 blasphemous stone tablets with the mark of Khorne were hung on his chest. The whole body exuded an evil breath. The most eye-catching thing was the 2 double-edged battle axes in the opponent's hands that were glowing with blood-red light. Yellow lightning filled the axe blades, which was daunting. Looking at this terrifying warrior who was half a head taller than them, some Khorne warriors who thought they were strong directly dropped the mutant rat troll, raised their battle axes and roared, "Sigurd, you coward finally showed up. I want to challenge you. As long as I cut off your head, I can become the new favorite of the blood god, the new champion." Blood sacrifice to the blood god, skull to the skull throne. Facing the ridicule of these little guys, Sigurd did not show any anger, but looked at these guys in surprise and shouted, "Really? Then you all come together. Today is destined to be a river of blood. Let your blood and the blood of these dirty rats be used to sacrifice to the great blood god." Before he finished speaking, Sigurd took the lead and rushed towards these Khorne warriors, not caring at all that these warriors were the warriors who had always followed him. The Khorne warriors roared and launched an attack, but this time the target was no longer the rat troll, but their own Chaos Lord. However, these warriors who had just been blessed by the blood god seemed to be too confident in their own strength and had no idea that there were always better people. The huge body directly knocked away the Khorne warrior who tried to block the way in front of it, and the spiked shoulder armor was still powerful, and it slammed into the mutant rat troll who was watching the show. Raw! Exclamation mark. Seeing that this little red man who was less than half of his height dared to actively crash into him, the mutant rat troll angrily waved the sharp blade in his hand to meet him. In its expectation, this little red man should be easily chopped into pieces like his companions, right? Snap roar. A red light flashed, and the mutant rat troll only felt a piercing pain in his wrist, and then he lost his balance and fell to the ground. Everything happened so quickly that it was not until he fell to the ground that the mutant rat troll noticed that his hands tied with sharp blade gloves had been chopped off. A large amount of scarlet blood with a foul smell gushed out from its wound, bathing Sigurd in the blood falling from the sky. Hahaha, this is really cool. So much blood will definitely please the blood god, right? Feeling the strong smell of blood in the air, Sigurd's blood red eyes covered by the Khorne rabbit ear helmet continued to emit red light and lightning, obviously receiving the baptism of God's grace. As the battle axe fell fiercely, the huge head of the mutant rat troll also rolled to the ground. Blood sacrifice to the blood god. Wow. Sigurd raised his two axes high, and his whole body emitted bursts of dazzling red light, coupled with the blood of the rat trolls dripping from his body, like a real bloodbathed warrior. The surrounding Khorne warriors looked at the red light on Sigurd's body with envy, and chopped the surrounding ratmen more frantically, hoping that they could also gain such glory. No, no. The horned rat has no hostility towards the chaos gods. Why did they suddenly attack us? A ratman trapper looked at the corpse of the mutant rat troll in despair, raised the trap in his hand in despair, and asked Sigurd in the distance. The clan rats in the nest had already given up resistance and ran faster than him. Only some of the low intelligence nest rats used for digging holes were still resisting. In all conscience, they really didn't do anything to offend the Norskins. At most, they just stole some food. Sigurd didn't seem to care about the trapper's question. Instead, he killed a wolf rat that was pretending to be dead and said nonchalantly, "There is no conflict between us, but because I want to see blood, and you dirty ratmen are the closest, so of course I will chop you first. You will pay the price." Facing the trapper's struggle before death, Sigurd disdainfully chopped him in half with an axe, and then shouted to the soldiers who were slaughtering ratmen, "Prepare the altar, sacrifice their dirty souls to the blood god, and then march to Prague, and let Kiev disappear from this world." Looking at these Khorne warriors who were performing blood sacrifices, Sigurd's distorted face under the mask gradually revealed a hideous smile. He was once an ambitious champion warrior. After killing everyone in his tribe and sacrificing their souls to Khorne, he received Khorne's mission, march into Kiev. According to the intention conveyed by Khorne in his mind, as long as he can destroy Kiev, then the great blood god will promote him to become the chosen of Khorne, and even have the opportunity to become the demon prince. Thinking of this, Sigurd's eyes looking towards the east gradually became fanatical. Kiev, you will be the stepping stone for my trial of the chosen, and destroy me bit by bit completely. How could he know that on the other side of the world in the Nagaroth region, there is also an elf who is doing the trial of the chosen, and is preparing to come? Tens of thousands of elven troops are enough to give this Norscan army of more than 100,000 people a hard time. And unlike Sigurd, he has been promoted to the chosen one in advance. Chapter 223 The Great Expedition. Outside Grand Town, tens of thousands of citizens have already spontaneously come to the outside of the city, looking at the silver armored army in front of them with either joy or frown. After several years of development, Rohan finally has enough soldiers to develop the army, and has successfully developed his Durachi elf army to a scale of tens of thousands. Of course, it sounds good, but more than half of them are teenagers who have just left the slums, and it will take several years for them to form combat effectiveness. But even so, Rohan selected 8,000 outstanding veterans to form the main force of his army. 4,000 silver mist guards blessed by the Lady of the Mist. With the assistance of the Pender Servant army, these halberd warriors are enough to deal with any battlefield here. 1,500 Black Ark pirates, Pistols, equipped with new equipment, can easily penetrate the heavy armor of Chaos Warriors at medium and short distances, and also have good results against the lightly armored Norscan raiders. 1000 Silver Mist Hunters equipped with new rune breach loading guns can not only easily kill Chaos Warriors and demons at long distances, but also not lose the upper hand even at close range. The remaining 1500 elven soldiers are all special warriors responsible for using artillery and flamethrowers, specially used to deal with special situations. Together with the 20,000 Penda servant army who stayed in the continent of Penda and waited for the call, Rohan went all out for this expedition. After the arsenal and the sorceresses worked day and night to forge, almost all the elf warriors carried at least one magic item. Although the protective effect may not even reach that of the dwarf runes, it is enough to improve the defense level of the entire army. In order to form this new army, Rohan spent at least nearly 1 million gold coins and various rare materials, almost half of the wealth left by Higgs. Moreover, among so many magic items, a large part of them are low-level amulets or magic runes that Rohan himself drew from the time and space card pool, which are rare treasures. It can be said that such a well-equipped army is rare even on the eve of the Longblood War, when the elves are at their strongest. Of course, there are naturally many people who sneer at Rohan's behavior that is similar to a prodigal son. Look at this army, how luxurious it is, but it was not used in the battlefield of attacking Ulthuan, but was sent to the old world thousands of miles away to resist chaos. How ridiculous. He actually let his soldiers use human weapons. Doesn't this lord feel ashamed and embarrassed about his behavior? It's a pity that such good equipment is wasted. If the whole army is annihilated on the battlefield, it will probably all be taken advantage of by those short-lived monkeys, right? From time to time, some foreign nobles came from the crowd to sneer and ridicule. They were all jealous of Rohan's equipment, but they couldn't beat them at all, so they could only talk about it verbally. They seemed to be confident that the people around them would agree with them. After all, the money should have been used for people's livelihood, not for weird expeditions. However, when they came to their senses, they found that these locals were looking at them with eyes that wished they could grind them to ashes. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. The nobles left the crowd awkwardly, not knowing why their drudgy style speech would cause such hostility. How could they know that for the locals who believed in the Lady of the Mist, they could die gloriously on the battlefield against chaos, and at least they would not have to worry about their souls falling into the hands of Slaanesh. As long as they could believe in the Lady of the Mist, they could avoid their souls falling into the hands of the cult of pleasure. What a great temptation this was for the elves who yearn for the freedom of their souls. The elves here are definitely crazy. I'd better go home and find a few lovers to relax. The nobles left Grand Town shouting. Obviously, they loved to enjoy themselves in the moment and only wanted to experience the happiness in reality, not the so-called freedom of soul. Boom. However, before they could recover from their indignation, there was a loud noise in the sky, and then the whole sky began to boil. The thick dark clouds within a radius of 100 miles all began to roll, and the clouds began to gather around a black hole, and finally turned like a whirlpool. The dark clouds that once covered the sky above Nagaroth were gradually sucked away by the black hole, and the long-lost sunshine enveloped Grand Town and even the entire bleak coast, making all the elves and slaves sluggish. Even in the distant Karandkar, the Durachi elves could feel the warm sunshine pouring down on the earth, repairing the land that had been devastated by the corruption of chaos. The harpers entrenched on the Tower of Despair howled in pain. They had lived in the shadows for many years and could not adapt to the sunshine at all. All the creatures in Grand Town stared at the holy light descending from the sky in a daze. The last time they saw the sun was when Rohan had just built the statue of the lady. Wow. With various gorgeous special effects, a holy figure slowly descended from the sky. Old warriors including Dario and Anger all looked at the figure in the sky with wide eyes. The golden claws on the left hand, an older rune sword on the waist, and the familiar Ithram silver armor on the body are undoubtedly the symbols of Lord Rohan. But who can tell me what is the matter with the pair of wings that constantly emit holy light? Exclamation mark. Feeling the wings flapping slightly behind him, Rohan slowly closed his eyes. This feeling of having an extra pair of flexible arms is really wonderful. It's Lord Rohan. Lord Rohan, I want to give birth to a child for you. Rohan, Rohan, Rohan. Seeing Rohan slowly descending from the sky, all the Durachi cheered excitedly, and the soldiers waved their weapons excitedly. Little did they know that the reason why Rohan was descending so slowly was because he was not familiar with how to fly, so he could only land slowly. Damn it, I should have learned how to fly earlier. This is so embarrassing, but now I'd better maintain my dignity. Looking at the cheering elves below, Rohan felt an itch on the back of his head. He could only pretend to be serious, but his eyes began to secretly observe the system panel. Phantom wings, taken from the purest Pegasus feathers in the Grey Mountains. Each feather comes from a different Pegasus, carefully woven by the Lady of the Mist. Features: flying unit, morale of friendly forces within range +8, induce fear. Terrify enemy forces, chosen by the Mist, as the first chosen by the Mist in history. Lady Rajlia's preference for you can be called doting. Enjoy it. Special protection +30%, allows the use of divine magic, feeling the abundant divine power in his body and his indestructible body. Rohan slowly landed on the top of the city wall, spread his wings, and said to the cheering warriors below, "The distant old world is being invaded by chaos, and new threats are about to return. Now, in the name of the Lady of the Mist and me, Saint Rohan, we will embark on the endless, great crusade. As long as there are creatures persecuted by chaos in this world, whether they are dwarves, humans, or elves, we have the obligation to go and help them." The whole audience was silent for a moment. Everyone was shocked by Rohan's speech that almost declared war on all chaos. Obviously, they didn't expect this result. They thought that the goal of this expedition was just this battle, but they didn't expect to be the savior of the world. But, savior, why does it sound so exciting? Looking at the crowds below who were gradually falling into madness, Rohan felt the power of faith in the air that was constantly drifting towards the statue of the lady, and then he put aside his worries and smiled slightly. He was still worried that his decision would be rejected, but he didn't expect these people to be so supportive. Seeing this, Rohan suddenly pulled out the rune sword, and the blue flames boiled from the sword. Then he spread his wings and shouted, "Let the war begin." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 Chaos Strikes. Compared to the Durachi elves who were celebrating their expedition, Lady Kisley, who was far away in the old world, did not have such leisure and elegance. Outside the city of Prague, Carol's Bridge, a huge stone bridge located outside the south gate of Prague, is named after Karl XII, and is extremely spacious and sturdy. The wide bridge deck is enough for several carriages to pass at the same time. There are exquisite dwarf stone towers on both sides of the bridge, and the dense missiles and arrow slits are enough to resist any invading enemy. The most terrifying thing is that, since there is a big river outside Prague, 3 transfer stations were built on this bridge, and each transfer station is a solid fortress. If the invaders want to attack the city of Prague, they must capture all 3 transfer stations, which is enough to make anyone who covets this city pay a heavy price. Because of this bridge that has resisted countless chaos attacks is also affectionately called Broken Soul Bridge by the locals. Even if the invaders can pass through these 3 transit stations, they will still have to face the 2 strongest legendary walls of Prague, Spire Wall Basta. These 2 legendary walls engraved with ancient magic runes divide the entire Prague into the inner city and the outer city. At the same time, there are solid castles built around the walls, which can be said to be easy to defend, but difficult to attack. This is exactly why Prague can stand tall in the Chaos Wasteland. Even the most powerful Tzeentch champion cannot use magic to break the runes on the walls, and can only use despicable viruses and round-the-clock warfare to consume the manpower in the city. However, even so, only the most powerful Chaos Legion can capture Prague, but it has never completely killed this great and terrible city. As long as Lady Kiev is still alive, this city that will be burned and destroyed will never die. Prague stands firm. P.S. The above content is official settings. On the broad magic wall, a scaly armored man wearing a ferret coat was looking at the red clouds gradually drifting towards Prague with a sad face, muttering, "The enemy is coming. Can we really defend this city?" According to the news from the conscription officers, there are nearly 10,000 temporarily recruited Cossack warriors and 4,000 heavily armored Cossack warriors in Prague. At the same time, nearly 1,000 shooting troops evacuated from Erlengrad have also been in place, plus the winged cavalry regiments rushed back from various places and a bear cavalry from the royal court. A huge army has been assembled in the city. If the Supreme King of the Dwarf Alliance personally led 800 dwarf reinforcement to arrive, he would not be afraid, even if the enemy was several times or even dozens of times larger than himself. But the problem was that the enemy's offensive was far greater than they had imagined. According to the news brought by the defeated army from Erlengrad, the Norsemen who had marched eastward had reached hundreds of thousands, all gathered under the command of a Chaos Lord. What was even more terrifying was that a demon army that came from nowhere had also joined this army. The winged cavalry who served as scouts only had time to see a large group of red demons, and the horses under their crotches were frightened by the steel bull knights who were driving them in the distance and fled back. Recalling the horrified look of the winged hussar, the sturdy man could not help but sigh. When he was about to return to the castle to explore countermeasures, he suddenly heard several rough voices beside him. "The designer of your city wall back then is definitely worthy of being included in the Great Book of Hatred. How can we reach such a high parapet? That's right, if I put my musket on it, I probably won't be able to see whose ass I'm shooting at. And those gun muzzles can't even fit my organ cannon. Are you going to let my gunners eat dust?" Several dwarf engineers and rune craftsmen were inspecting the walls of Kyiv, constantly criticizing these unfriendly walls in human language, wishing they could go straight to settle accounts with the engineers of that year. The High King of the Dwarves, Eriksson, stood on a small bench with dissatisfaction, looking at the large red cloud outside the city and complaining, "Really, we were asked to help, but we couldn't even see what was outside the city wall. I brought so many muskets with me. I'm really sorry, Your Highness. We didn't expect the dwarves to come back to reinforce us at first, otherwise we would have arranged a suitable position in advance." Hearing the High King of the Dwarves' complaints, the strong man scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. After all, they thought that the reinforcement coming this time were from the Empire, so they prepared wine and cakes in advance. Unexpectedly, the Empire was deeply mired in the quagmire of civil war and had no intention of going north to support, so all the preparations of Kyiv were in vain. In the end, instead of waiting for other human reinforcement, they waited for the High King of the Dwarves, which surprised him, and the Ice and Snow Court. These dwarves had no interest in sweet wine and cakes, so they had to bring beer and sausages to barely appease these stubborn dwarves. As a boyar noble of Prija, he was very grateful to these dwarves who came from afar to help them fight against chaos. In response to the apology of the strong man, the dwarves who always responded to soft words touched their beards. The High King coughed a few times and waved his hand nonchalantly, saying, "It's okay, Peter. We won't come here for many years anyway. We can just use the stools for now, but you are not allowed to laugh at us." Looking at the dwarf soldiers standing on the stools with their muskets, the corners of the mouths of the surrounding Cossack guards curled up a kind smile. They are now comrades in arms fighting against chaos together, so how could they laugh at these comrades? How could the 1,000-year-long friendship between humans and dwarves be broken by a small misunderstanding? If the Witch King had explained the situation directly to Gotrek Starbreaker, based on his relationship with the dwarves might have stood on his side in the civil war. Even Peter's mouth curled up slightly, and he was about to step forward to continue chatting with the High King, but the invaders did not give them this opportunity. Woo woo woo. The turbid bugle call unique to chaos came from the distant skyline. The Cossack warriors who had been on high alert immediately closed the outpost on the bridge and nervously picked up their weapons and shouted, "The devil is coming. Everyone prepare your weapons and equipment. Load all the artillery quickly. Anyone who misses a shot today will be whipped." A steady stream of roars and alarms spread from the outpost to the walls of Prague, and the dwarves poked their heads out and looked towards the skyline. A Chaos Lord surrounded by red light was riding on a several-meter high corn steel bull, and the blood-red battle axe in his hand was constantly emitting dazzling lightning. It was Sigurd, the ambitious champion of Norska who had won the favor of Khorne and the Chaos Lord who had now united all the tribes of Norska. Looking at the magnificent walls of Prague and the great river in front of him, the corners of Sigurd's mouth under his mask could not help but rise, and then he roared, "Kjolv, we finally meet again." Chapter 225. Plaid stands firm. Sigurd. It's been a long time since we last met. Looking at Sigurd standing alone in the Chaos Wasteland, Peter touched the pistol on his waist, his eyes full of hatred and anger. Sigurd, he had heard of this name for a long time. More than a decade ago, the Erengrid region had been frequently attacked by the Norsemen, and one of the most famous tribal chieftains was Sigurd. The Grand Orthodox Patriarch at the time was very angry, and personally led the shooting army and a large number of elite troops to join the Norsemen's territory, vowing to destroy Sigurd's tribe. However, after waiting for more than half a year, people still had no news of the Patriarch, but Sigurd's tribe seemed to have disappeared. Everyone thought that the Patriarch's troops had perished with Sigurd's tribe, and the sad people built a statue for the Patriarch to commemorate his contribution. However, just a few years ago, Sigurd's troops made a comeback and began to plunder Kjolv more unscrupulously. The new Patriarch thought that Sigurd had escaped by chance in the battle with the previous Patriarch, so he sent troops to attack Sigurd, preparing to destroy Sigurd in one fell swoop. However, no one expected that Sigurd, who disappeared that year, not only did not lose the battle, but instead took the defeated and surrendered Patriarch deep into the Chaos Wasteland and sacrificed himself and the Patriarch to Khorne. After upgrading to a Khorne warrior, he summoned a huge Chaos army and easily destroyed the defenseless Kjolv army. After that, this guy has been leading his Chaos War state to wander between Kjolv and the Chaos Wasteland, just like a leech lying on the mother country to suck blood. Because the whole of Kjolv was busy dealing with the sudden impact of the Greenskin Wug at that time, this guy escaped. And now, this guy dares to bring his lowly Norscan compatriots back and try to destroy Kjolv, which is simply wishful thinking. Carsbridge in the first outpost castle at the forefront, more than a dozen cannons loaded with scattershot shells were pushed into the muzzles, and the Cossack warriors also drew their bows and strings, ready for battle. Looking at the Khorne army all over the mountains and plains in the distance, the garrisoned boyar nobles couldn't help licking their dry lips, then raised their pistols and shouted, "Let the artillery get closer before firing. All the heavy armored Cossacks enter the city gate, and the light armored Cossacks are ready." In the distant wasteland, dozens of Khorne minotaurs with purple red skin and hideous faces were staring at the distant city gate with red eyes. They could feel the panic of the humans behind the city gate, which made them more eager for human blood. Remember, your mission is to destroy the city gate. The Great Blood God is watching this battle. You beasts must not destroy the plan of the Great Blood God. Sigurd, sitting on the Khorne steel bull, looked at these minotaurs with disdain. He always held a contemptuous attitude towards these beastmen mutants. In his eyes, these minotaurs with amazing destructive power were just tools for him to deal with the gates of Kjolv, nothing more. But the minotaurs, who were eager for blood, did not notice this, and even if they knew, they would not care, because they had already rushed up with a roar. Moo. Minotaur. Shooters, aim quickly. Looking at these giant beasts with amazing speed, the shooters on the castle turned their guns and aimed at the huge minotaurs. Shoot. Pa pa pa. The sound of gunfire like pouring beans came from the city wall, and round bullets were shot at the scarlet behemoths not far away at a speed that could not be detected by the naked eye. At the same time, other Cossacks also began to bend their bows and shoot arrows, shooting arrows with barbs at these huge moving targets. Roar. The bullets and arrows were deeply embedded in the minotaurs, but the strong flesh given to them by Khorne made these muskets and arrows only leave some blood holes on them. What's more terrifying is that before the shooting army began to load ammunition, these projectiles stuck between the muscles were squeezed out, and the wounds began to heal slowly. The Great Blood God advocates primitive bloody close combat, and at the same time extremely discriminates against long-range weapons and magic, which also leads to almost all Khorne believers having strong armor and muscles. What? You said that the flames spewed from the mouth of the bloodthirsty demon are magic? No, 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 it just drank the magma that symbolizes the belief in the blood god. Doghead. The garrison nobles' faces gradually became ugly. He thought that Sigurd would let the Norscan soldiers attack the city, so he changed to scattering projectiles, but he didn't expect that the other party would let the Minotaur attack the city. Damn it, notify the soldiers at the second transfer station to prepare to resist the Minotaur. Notify the artillery to fire. Looking at the Minotaur that was about to collide with the city gate, the boyar noble took out his pistol and waved the saber in his hand to give orders. Since the city gate is located inside the city wall in a concave shape, the artillery on both sides can easily shoot the Minotaur at the city gate. Boom. The gunners who had been waiting for a long time hurriedly aimed their guns at the Minotaur that collided with the city gate and lit the fuses of the torches in their hands. The 4 cannons aimed at the city gate fired at the same time, and hundreds of bullets instantly turned into lead rain and shot towards the Minotaur. Moo. At such a close distance, even the tough flesh of the Minotaur could hardly withstand the rain of bullets, not to mention that the cannons shooting from top to bottom could easily penetrate their heads. Several huge bodies of the Minotaur fell to the ground, which made some Cossack soldiers smile, but the faces of the boyar nobles stiffened. Compared with the rune walls of Prija, the gates of these 3 outposts were all ironclad logs, without any magical protection. Just now, the collision of a Minotaur had left deep cracks on the city gate, and such a war of attrition was obviously not something the Prague defenders could afford. Looking at the few ranged troops in the outpost that could cause damage to the demons, the boyar noble gritted his teeth and shouted, "Don't be too happy too soon, at least there are still a few hundred Minotaurs rushing over. The shooting troops and gunners all retreat, and the others will do their best to cover. In the name of blood, for the motherland." Because the heavy artillery and shooting troops needed time to retreat, the boyar nobles directly led hundreds of Cossacks with spears to the city gate and waited for the arrival of the Minotaurs. They were ready to delay desperately, and they must let the ranged troops that could play a decisive role withdraw safely to the rear. Moo. As if they had sensed the human breath behind the door, the Minotaurs at the city gate raised their giant axes and howled and chopped at the shaky wooden door in front of them. Looking at the timid soldiers around him, the boyar noble waved his long sword and sang passionately, "We are the strong shield guarding the ice and snow king's court, the sharp blade in the hands of the motherland. I dedicate our lives and glory to the motherland in exchange for the blood of the enemy." The Cossack warriors, who were originally a little scared, heard the singing of the boyar nobles and roared out the familiar song, "The motherland is calling, the bear god is with us, and Jurik's anger burns towards our enemies." Moo. The Minotaurs, stimulated by the singing, launched a more crazy attack on the wooden door in front of them, wishing to tear the humans behind the door into pieces immediately and drink their flesh and blood. Through the broken wooden door, the Cossack warriors could already see the hideous faces of the Minotaurs and their skull eyes like the god of death. However, it is not known whether their courage was praised by the bear god or whether it was the human god of war, Eric, who was witnessing this war, that every young man was no longer afraid. Seeing the city gate about to break, the Cossacks raised their spears, looked at the monsters with a firm gaze, and roared with all their strength, "My blood will irrigate the land of the motherland, but in this blood-red soil, the most colorful flowers will bloom." Boom. The gate shattered with a sound, and the hungry and thirsty Minotaurs howled and rushed towards the Cossack phalanx in front of them, with the giant axes in their hands shining with a strange green light under the green light of the evil moon. For the motherland. Ura. However, at this time, the eyes of the Cossacks were all shining with the glory of human courage. Before the Minotaurs launched a charge, these brave Cossack warriors took the lead in launching an attack. Countless sharp spears pierced the tough skin of the Minotaurs, but their weapons were, as if assisted by God, easily tearing their skin. The blessing of Khorne did give them unimaginable ranged resistance and magic resistance, but the close range attack full of courageous hymns was enough to penetrate this layer of Khorne's blessing. Don't forget that, although Khorne is the god of blood and war, he is also the god of courage and loyalty. Perhaps in his eyes, compared to the Minotaur whose mind is full of greed and bloodlust, the human who burst out with supreme courage at this moment is more worthy of his blessing. For the motherland. Prija will not fall. Blood. No. For the motherland. For the ice and snow court. I don't know if the blood god is really paying attention to this war. Some Cossacks who successfully killed the Minotaur by luck and their own strength gradually had red eyes and fought against chaos more bravely and fearlessly. For a while, at this narrow city gate, hundreds of brave Cossack warriors actually miraculously resisted the Minotaur's offensive. Kill them all. Never let them enter the castle. The boy noble waved the saber in his hand frantically. He didn't know why his saber could easily cut the skin of the Minotaur, but he still fought bravely at the forefront. His armor was stained with blood. 3 Minotaurs had already fallen beside him, almost all of them with fatal wounds piercing their hearts. He didn't even know where his strength came from, as if there was a force that always supported him in the battle. Unfortunately, as the wounds on his body increased, his eyes gradually began to become heavy, and even the hand that wielded the saber became a little weak. After all, he was just a mortal. No matter how hard he tried to exchange injuries for injuries, no matter how bravely he fought, it could not change his essence as a human. Thinking of this, a trace of clarity flashed in his eyes. When he looked at the Minotaur in front of him that rushed forward again, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Yes, I'm a human. Looking at the few remaining Kosa warriors around him, the boy noble dropped the long sword in his hand, picked up a spear, and shouted with his last strength while charging. Pridger stands. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.